Go.
Well, good morning, and welcome to the City Planning Commission Public Meeting. Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street. Today is June 7, 2017. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chair Lago,
Here.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Here.
Commissioner Besser, Commissioner Cantor, Commissioner Cerullo, Commissioner De La Use, Commissioner Dweck, Commissioner Edie, Commissioner Efron,
Here.
Commissioner Knight, Commissioner Levin, Commissioner Marin, Commissioner Ortiz. A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, May 24th, 2017.
On the minutes, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved.
Scheduling, on calendar numbers 1 through 6, we have resolutions for adoption, scheduling Wednesday, June 21st, 2017, for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reade Street.
On the resolution, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So the resolutions are adopted.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 7. Borough of the Bronx, calendar numbers 7 and 8. Calendar number 7, CD2, N1700880ZRX. Calendar number 8, C1700870ZMX. In the matter of applications for zoning text and zoning map amendments concerning Wetlock and 165th Street rezoning. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 7 and 8, Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo, Commissioner De La Use, Commissioner Dweck, Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Knight, Commissioner Levin, Commissioner Marin, Commissioner Ortiz. Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 7 and 8. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 9, CD1, N170286ZRM, in the matter of an application for a zoning text amendment concerning the Lower Manhattan Plaza applicability. For a favorable report on calendar number 9, Chair Lago,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo. Commissioner De La Use. Commissioner Dweck. Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Knight. Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz. A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 9. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 10 through 12. Calendar number 10, CD6, C170187ZMM. Calendar number 11 has been withdrawn. Calendar number 12, N170186A, ZRM, in the matter of applications for a zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning the Greater East Midtown. For a favorable report on calendar number 10 and for a favorable report as modified on calendar number 12. Chair Lago?
Well, this is a momentous occasion, and I know that every other commissioner here has anticipated this vote for far longer than I have, so I'll keep my remarks brief on this. But I want to make two observations. The first is that the proposal that we're voting on is remarkably similar to the steering committee's recommendation, and I think that that is a testament to the power of inclusive planning. But secondly, and more importantly, is that in response to the feedback that we got through the public review process from the community boards, from the borough president, from the area stakeholders, the proposal has been strengthened. We now know that as part of the proposal, there are commitments from the administration to implement some above-grade pedestrian realm improvements. The proposal has also been modified to increase public involvement in the governing group that's being created to oversee the Public Realm Improvement Fund. I want to acknowledge City Council member Dan Garodnick, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, for their leadership of the East Midtown Steering Committee. This steering committee didn't just identify planning priorities, it also forged a consensus-driven and a solution-oriented vision for the future of East Midtown. Next, I want to acknowledge the leadership of Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn. She convened a task force of all of our sister agencies that included transportation, parks, landmarks, budget, and even the MTA so that we were certain that we had all of the appropriate expertise coming to bear. And last, but most assuredly not least, I want to thank the very, very large city planning team, which was led for most of the review period, for most of the gestation of this proposal by Carl Weisbrod and Purnima Kapoor. This team, if I were to read out the names, we would be here for an hour, so I will just note that the team includes folks from the Manhattan Borough Office, the Environmental Assessment and Review Division, the Zoning Division, Councils Division, Technical Review Division, and myriad additional team members who spent countless hours putting in their brain power, their energy, but I'd say most of all, their heart into this proposal. So I am so pleased to be able to vote yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
I would add my voice to that of the chair with regard to the city planning staff, the Manhattan team led by Edith Sue Chen. This has been a several-year effort, and I salute them for their good work. I vote yes.
Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
I'm just glad you got through this without me. Recused.
Commissioner Delauss?
We barely got through it without you. I would just echo the comments of both the chair and vice chair and just say that this proposal has benefited from a robust public process that resulted in recommendations that are largely reflected in the proposal before us. The one thing that I would ask that the city council consider is whether or not a special permit should be required for changes in buildings in the proposed area from office to residential use. With that, I vote yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Ditto to all the positive comments, and I vote yes.
Commissioner Edie?
I'd also like to commend the work of the staff and the department for this monumentous process. I'm very pleased to vote yes. Thank you.
Commissioner Efron?
I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of the chair and vice chair as well, and I vote yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz? A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 10, and a favorable report as modified has been adopted on calendar number 12. Okay. Borough of Queens, calendar numbers 13 and 14. Calendar number 13, City 14, C170256ZMQ. Calendar number 14, N170257ZRQ. In the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning Broad Channel. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 13 and 14, Chair Lago.
You know, the two votes that we're going to be taking on the resiliency-focused rezonings of Hamilton Beach, and I'll jump ahead on Broad Channel, look, they might not be at the same grand scale as our East Midtown vote, but they're every bit as important. They mark this crucial step in enhancing the resiliency of our coastal neighborhoods by enabling construction and retrofitting of buildings, but at the same time recognizing that in areas of unusually high flood risk, which both of these Queen neighborhoods have, the rezonings are ensuring that the future development doesn't substantially increase the population that's put at risk. So in this instance, I want to acknowledge Councilmember Ulrich, Borough President Katz, and most especially the residents of Hamilton Beach and Broad Channel who stood by us and worked collaboratively with our team to shape this proposal. And I'd also, of course, like to recognize the City Planning Project team for their excellent work, and in this instance, in particular, the Waterfront and Open Space Division and the Queens Division. But I also want to recognize experts who the Commission might not regularly see appearing before us, but who are absolutely indispensable to the quality of the work product that comes before us. These are the divisions of zoning, of technical review, of environmental assessment and review, of counsel's office. They're not up there at the podium, but the quality of the work, the soundness of the proposals is very much dependent on them. And so I'm very pleased to vote yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Besser?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes, and also, Madam Chair, if I may, to be recorded yes on the affirmative for the first two items also.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Efron?
Thank you. If the last proposal on East Midtown is the gem, these are protecting the jewels in our crown as a waterfront city, and I very enthusiastically vote yes.
Commissioner Knight? Commissioner Levin?
I've got three models of collaborative community-based planning with the community involved from the very outset, and that's terrific. I vote yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz? Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 13 and 14. Borough of Queens, calendar numbers 15 and 16. Calendar number 15, CD 10, C170255, ZMQ. Calendar number 16, N170267, ZRQ. In the matter of application for zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning Hamilton Beach. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 15 and 16. Chair Lago?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 15 and 16. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 17, CD1, N170138, ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 25 Stanley Avenue for adoption on calendar number 17. Chair Lago?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 17 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 18, CD3, N170123, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 222 and 228 Getz Avenue for adoption on calendar number 18. Chair Lago?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 18 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 19, CD3, N170195, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 528 Albarn Avenue for adoption on calendar number 19. Chair Lago?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor? Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin? Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
A calendar number 19 has been adopted. Borough, Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 20, CD2, N170185, ZCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 35 Charter Oak Road for adoption on calendar number 20. Chair Lago?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles?
Yes.
Commissioner Bessa?
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo?
Yes.
Commissioner De La Us?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Knight?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
Calendar number 20 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 24. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar numbers 21 and 22. Calendar number 21, CD 16, C170189, ZMK. Calendar number 22, N170190, ZRK. A public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning Ebenezer Plaza.
There's going to be a applicant team presentation of 10 minutes, and so I would welcome Frank Jacques, Erica Keller, Peter Procida, Summer Alumnus, and Bishop Hugh Nelson.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you, and Commissioners. I'm Frank St. Jacques of Sheldon Love LPC. We're land use counsel to this project. Peter Procida of Procida Companies is here, as well as Erica Keller-Walla of Brissa Builders, and Bishop Hugh Nelson of the Church of God of East Flatbush. I'll briefly go over the zoning application for the project, and then Peter and Erica will discuss the project and the affordable component, and Bishop Nelson will discuss the church and operations, and will also be here to answer questions from the commission. This is two actions. We're in Brooklyn in Community Board 16. We're This is a zoning map amendment and zoning text amendment application. The zoning map amendment would be to replace an existing M11 district with R7A C24 and R7D C24 districts. And the zoning text amendment is to map the area as an MIH area with both options 1 and 2. So you can see from the this area map, it's a roughly trapezoid-shaped project area between Mother Gaston Boulevard to the west and Powell Street to the east. New Lots Avenue is to the north, and Hegeman Street is to the south. It's 3 city blocks. The project sites are the easternmost 2 blocks, and the westernmost block is not under the applicant's control. The zoning designations requested are R7A to the north of the project area, mapped along New Lots Avenue with a C24 commercial overlay, and an R7D along Hegeman Avenue to the south. The R7D would be 150 feet from Hegeman on the easternmost block and 100 feet from Hegeman on the middle block. The site is within a transit zone, or the transit zone. It's served by the New Lots Avenue subway station about a quarter mile to the east, which also connects to Broadway Junction a few stops further on. The B35, B15, B60, and B8 bus lines also serve the area. So we're proposing this transit-oriented development project to bring new residential, commercial, and community facility buildings to this underutilized site with a total of 531 new dwelling units, approximately 27,000 square feet of commercial floor area, and approximately 34,000 square feet of community facility floor area. So we'll start with the easternmost site. This site will be developed with 9 and 11-story buildings with 315 units. That's about 280,000 or 282,000 square feet total floor area, with 240,000 square feet of residential floor area, about 7,500 square feet of commercial floor area fronting New Lots Avenue, and the Church of God of East Flatbush will occupy an approximately 34,000 square foot community facility space wrapping from along Powell Street and along Hegeman. Here, we can just show that. This is the footprint for both of the buildings. As you can see, for the easternmost building on the larger site, we have retail fronting New Lots Avenue, and then the large church building on the southernmost portion of the site. The middle site is smaller. It would contain a 7 and 11-story building with 216 dwelling units. It's about 185,000 square feet. 166,000 would be occupied by residential floor area, but 19,000 square feet with retail floor area. And the retail is situated along New Lots Avenue with a wrap along Christopher Avenue and also along Hegeman Avenue. The speaking with respect to the project design overall, the retail is focused along New Lots Avenue with the church occupying a large portion of the ground floor of the easternmost site, with a portion of the retail along Hegeman Avenue in between Christopher and Zachman Street. The Brownsville Recreation Center is located immediately south of the project area, below Hegeman Avenue. And the intent of this project to bring in these new mixed-use buildings is to activate New Lots Avenue. There's a rendering showing the new buildings. Is to activate these streets, which have been long occupied by auto-related uses, where the pedestrian experience is simply not there. These new buildings would provide active ground floor uses, both with the community facility, church space, and as well as the retail along both New Lots and along Hegeman. One of the intents of the project is to create a connection between existing residential use to the north, north of New Lots Avenue, and the Brownsville Recreation Area, Recreation Center to the south, and open up these corridor streets and open up Hegeman to new active uses and create a more inviting pedestrian experience along those streets. I will turn it over to Erica to discuss some of the project specifics with respect to the affordable housing, and then open it up to questions.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Erica Keller, and I'm representing Ebenezer Plaza Owner, which is a joint venture entity that was formed with the church's not-for-profit affiliate, Hope, and Proceda Companies, Brisa Builders, and Evergreen City. Brisa and Evergreen are both minority women-owned business enterprises. In this venture, we are offering 100% affordable housing through HPD's ELA program. We are working through, there is a new term sheet that has just been released, so we are working through those new terms for that program. But again, this is 100% affordability. All of the units will be 60% AMI and below. We can speak a little bit more specifically. Peter, you can speak to the percentage breakdowns, and that is for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. For Phase 1. Phase 2, which is the smaller site, as Frank had indicated, will offer, again, 100% affordability, but at 50%, 80% AMI and below, and the remaining 50% at 60% AMI and below. We will have the commercial retail components as well as an opportunity for the management office to be located on the site, since we do have 531 units in total. The Church of God of East Flatbush will have, between the ground and the cellar floor, approximately 40,000 square feet of space that they will use for both religious and non-religious uses to support programming that they currently offer in East Flatbush will now be extended to their new location in Brownsville. We have been engaged with the community board as well as the council member through this process, as well as the Brooklyn Borough President. This actually came out of the Brooklyn Borough President's Office for Faith-Based Affordable Housing Development, and this is an example of those initiatives that were set up about 3 or 4 years ago. Peter, I'd like to turn it over to you at this time to speak about some additional specifics about the project.
So, as Erica said, the first phase will be developed in accordance with the ELA program, with 100% of those units below 60% of AMI. The second phase will be developed with the mix and match program, with approximately 50% of the units below 60% of AMI and the remaining below 80% of AMI. We currently are exploring numerous opportunities for the retail on Hegeman and New Lots. Our focus is to work with the community. We've met with a number of local nonprofits, including Made in Brownsville, Melting Pot, and the Brownsville Culinary Center, in order to really look at how we can activate the space, this retail space, which is adjacent to the Brownsville Recreation Center, and really could help bring people from the residential district to the north down towards the park and the Brownsville Rec Center. We've met with the community board numerous times in order to really hone in on our unit mix. We had a project that was slightly more heavily geared towards larger family-style units and had about 25% studios. We worked with the community board, and at their request, we've reduced our studio percentage to approximately 10%.
Mr. Presida, I suspect that many of your additional points will be brought out in the
I would
questioning
imagine
from the
that-
commissioners. So if I could ask the applicant team to remain, and yes, Commissioner Dweck.
Can you, thank you, can you speak more about the unit mix? And certainly, I'm looking at the Borough President's recommendations on larger units, so if you could speak more to that and continue on.
Yeah, so we initially had the project that had approximately 50% units that were 2 bedrooms and larger, and 25% of our units were studios. In order to really get the financing to work, HPD pushes a number of units. It's not based on, individuals or how many people are living in the homes. So with the reduction in the studios that the community board requested, they said, I forget exact, I think we had 147 studios. They requested we bring that number down to 73. They requested we reduce the number by 73. Which we complied with, and in order to do so, we had to shift around our unit mix to make sure we were not losing too many units so that the project was still economically viable with HPD's programming.
So your cutback in studios would preclude you from
So what we did
creating
is,
larger units?
yeah, so we cut back studios and we had to take some of the 2 bedrooms and make them 1 bedrooms.
All right, thank you. And may I continue, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
So, looking at the other Borough President's recommendations, certainly I think he has one for a fresh supermarket, and as we spoke about the retail, you're looking for a tenant. If you could speak to his other concerns that he laid out in his recommendation.
Yeah, so we are reaching out to a number of local nonprofits, include, as I said, the Brownsville Culinary Center and Melted Pot, to try and find some sort of use over there that would satisfy the fresh district. It is a little far out to get a tenant committed, just that we haven't, begun construction, but we are, actively looking for a supermarket tenant to take some of that space.
And we have recently been given some information about Aldi, which is a smaller brand because, usually we need about 10,000 square feet for the fresh program and above. However, our retail spaces are slightly smaller than that, but this supermarket brand was brought to our attention, so we're beginning some conversation with them to measure their interests.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Delhouze.
Just following up on the conversation about the commercial and speaking to other nonprofits, does your underwriting, is it flexible enough to accommodate those kinds of uses?
Yeah, so our underwriting considers that it's not the strongest retail market, and we've been looking at rents that are, not at market. They're a little bit below. And that's what we've been underwriting to, is something that we think a nonprofit would be able to afford.
Okay, great.
Other questions from the commission? Commissioner Efron.
I'm following up on a question Commissioner Levin had at certification and yesterday, unless you would like to do it. Yeah. About the parking for the church in particular, and how many people you expect to have there, how many days a week, and where they will be coming from, or where will their cars
Thank
be?
you. One of the good things about this project is that we're able to retain our present location. So we're presently located at 409 East 95th Street, which is maybe 5-6 minutes drive between the sites. And so what we have already done is to enter into an agreement with Brookdale Hospital, of which I'm a part of the Board of Trustees, about parking. And so what the church has decided to do actually prior before this stage and the initial planning, in order to reduce the issue of parking, is to make this arrangement with Brookdale Hospital. We have buses that will shuttle. So we have already been encouraging our members to get into the habit of utilizing the parking at the hospital. So our shuttles will operate between the hospital parking and the new site. Furthermore, the number of vehicles we have will be parked at our present location. So what that does is that it would reduce the number of motor traffic through that site.
So just if I understanding correctly,
Okay.
you're anticipating that everyone coming to this new church facility will park either at Brookdale Hospital or at the current church?
I wouldn't say everyone, but most. And so our shuttles, so we would provide a shuttle between the garage and the new site.
And how many people are we talking about?
We have around 1,000 members. That doesn't mean they all come at the same time.
Except on certain holidays, right?
I wish they did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Easter.
No, that was my question.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Well, just following up on that a little bit, I'd be curious to know a bit more about the church, about its
Sure.
origins,
Thank you.
its congregation, how this new space will allow you to do what you want to be
Thank you.
doing in the future. And then the more precise question is, what's the capacity of the, whatever we're calling it here, sanctuary worship space?
This worship
How
space,
how many
okay.
chairs are on that map there?
The capacity is going to be approximately 1,250 to 1,300.
Yes.
Thanks.
So the congregation was established about 47 years ago, was actually started by West Indian immigrants. It's one of the major congregations with our denomination, the Church of God, which headquarters in Cleveland, Tennessee. We have actually established 11 other congregations from this one congregation.
Wow.
So it has a long history. Also has a long history of benevolence. So we established the Hope Center Development Corporation as arm's length from the church, which is incorporated, which provides food, feeds over 80,000 individuals per year. We also operate a computer training center, GED. So we provide a pantry. So, and this is all happening now at our present site. We also have over 100 individuals who are trained as community chaplains. So we have chaplains functioning in different hospitals or nursing homes. So what we hope to do, which is, I think, a great opportunity, move into this new site, we'll actually expand our benevolence program. And even with the families above, we will be able to provide some support system in terms of our community. You're welcome.
Commissioner Ortiz? Okay. Great. Oh, yes, Commissioner Levin.
I have a land use question to ask, if that's all right, given what we're doing. It's much more interesting to talk about churches and social service organizations. But I am curious, if you look at the surrounding area, it is largely pretty low scale, 1 and 2 family houses, and, you know, in the distance, there's some larger buildings. But I'm struggling to understand how the scale of this building, how 7 to, 11-story buildings are going to fit into the scale of this area. I understand how it fits into the development program and the financial requirements for getting this thing to happen, but how is it going to fit into the neighborhood? How does it make land use sense?
So it's a good question. We certainly acknowledge that to the north, within the R6, a large portion of this area is developed with single-family homes developed in the 1980s pursuant to the Nehemiah program. This zoning, both the R6 and the M11 at the project site, are original to 1961. This area was in poor shape in the 1980s, and the Nehemiah program was a program developed to attract new moderate and middle income residential users to the area. It was highly successful, but it was built at much lower density than what would be permitted in the R6. So this is very low scale, and we certainly acknowledge that. What we will note is that just a little bit further to the east at New Lots Avenue, the city has just approved, at Van Sinderen, the city has approved an R7A C23 project, acknowledging the same presence of lower scale homes to the north, but also creating a balance between new mixed-use development particularly here with 100% affordable housing and a new home for the church. What we've tried to do with the rezoning and the zoning designations that are chosen are to create a transition between the R6 to the north, the R7A along New Lots Avenue, and the R7D along Hegeman. The R7D faces open area, not only with the Brownsville Recreation Center, but a very wide Linden Boulevard at 170 feet, and then this very large open area that's a rail yard. It's one of the largest contiguous open spaces in the city. So we feel that the overall benefit to transit-oriented new housing development at a greater density is appropriate in taking this underutilized M district and providing new housing, new retail, and new community facility space.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. As I look at the site plan, it strikes me that Sackman Street is going to be an important sort of north-south connector to the park. And there's no retail there, right? So I'm sort of curious what the treatment is, what sort of the pedestrian experience will be like. Are we going to be facing, is there going to be some sort of transparency into this green space? Is there going to be a blank wall on the side of on the other side?
Right.
So that, how will we ensure this is a nice way to get to the park for the residents on the other side?
Understood. I can have Peter address that.
So what we've been designing with the church is actually a wall system on this block that has a number of windows that view into the sanctuary space. And thus, right now, what we're envisioning is not a brick wall, is really sort of a metal fence, not a chain link, but a nice, wrought iron metal fence that will show, access, visual access into the green space. These walls will also wrap with retail storefrontage, so that there's really not all that much open brick wall as you travel along Sackman Street.
And what kind of lighting will you have there? Sometimes lighting is an issue.
I believe there are overhead lights currently in place. We will work with DOT to make sure that it's a well-lit street. Right now on our building, we do have lights designed on all these walls and cameras at all the entry points to ensure that it's a safe and well-secured part of the neighborhood. Open space. Yeah, and cameras in the open space as well.
Okay, is crime an issue in this area?
Not necessarily, but we do, in our housing developments that we've done in the past, we want to ensure that everyone feels safe. This is a corridor that will be well traveled to the park, and we want to make sure, that it's well protected from any crime that may happen.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? We don't have any registered speakers, but if there is anyone present who would want to be heard, now's the time. Okay, if not, then the hearing is closed. Thank you to the applicant team.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 23 through 26. Calendar number 23, CD 11, C170275, Calendar number 24, N170276, ZRM. Calendar number 25, C170093, Triple M. Calendar number 26, C170278, PPM. A public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map, zoning text, and city map amendments, and for the disposition of city-owned property concerning 126th Street Bus Depot. Notice, a public hearing is being held by the City Planning Commission in conjunction with the above-viewed appearance to receive comments related to a draft environmental impact statement. This hearing is being held pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the City Environmental Quality Review.
I'll now invite the applicant team to make a 15-minute presentation, and the applicant team is comprised of Cecilia Kushner, Sharon Wilkins, Lauren Merkel, Simon Kowitsky, and available for questions are Amanda Sutphin and Michael Papalardo.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Lago. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Cecilia Kushner. I'm a Senior Vice President at the Economic Development Corporation. I'm really excited to be able to talk to this project. On a more personal note, I was at city planning for a real long time, so it's good to be back in front of the Commission. So this project is really unique, and it's a unique initiative to allow us to honor an essential piece of Harlem and New York City history, and as well as repurposing city-owned land for community benefits. I'd like to thank the Manhattan office for getting us there, and really thank as well Speaker Melissa Mark Viveretto, Reverend Singletary, Sharon Wilkins, and the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force for the tireless work and advocacy in getting us today. I'm joined by a member of the team as well who can answer questions with me. So this site has a remarkable history, and I'll talk a little bit about that because this is really what led to us being able to be here today. But Cheryl Wilkins, who is the Manhattan Deputy Borough Historian, will be able to answer any specific questions you may have. So the Low Dutch Reformed Church of Harlem that was established in 1960 created a burial ground near the church for people of African descent. And the roughly 80,000 square feet historical burial ground boundary can be seen on the context map that is right behind me here. In the 1930s, the site containing the African burial ground was leased to an elder of the Low Dutch Reformed Church as grazing land for his sheep and cattle, and that really marked the beginning of a series of transaction and redevelopment throughout the site history that all resulted in an immense amount of physical disturbance to the burial ground. And in 1962, the MTA took ownership of the site and converted it into the 126th Street bus depot. Evidence of the African burial ground was discovered in the early 2000s, and in 2009, Speaker Melissa Mark Viveretto formed the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. She's the co-chair with Dr. Reverend Patricia Singletary, who is the Reverend of the Elmdorf Reformed Church in East Harlem, and that church is the descendant church of the original Low Dutch Reformed Church that originally established the African burial ground. The task force mission is really to promote, to protect, and to reclaim the history of the Harlem African burial ground. And the task force vision for the site is of a living memorial that is iconic and timeless, evokes the historical significance of the site for the African American community and all New Yorkers, and the impact of the site through education and empowerment, and as well as foster a sacred sense of place. In 2015, EDC commissioned AKRF, and AKRF is here to answer any technical archaeological questions you may have, to conduct an archaeological assessment that determined that the original burial ground had been displaced from the site in the mid-19th century. As part of the study, portions of human remains were uncovered outside of the historical boundary of the burial ground, providing further evidence of the cemetery disruption. These remains were carefully removed after a consecration ceremony that was held by the Reverend on site, and they're currently preserved in temperature-controlled storage so they can be re-entered into the future memorial once the project is actually completed and developed. As a result of this close consultation with the KRF, the task force, and the African Burial Ground Task Force, we were awarded the Mark Award for Community Engagement by the Society for Historical Archaeology in January of this year, and we're really proud of this award. So of course, before any development, an additional archaeological evaluation will take place under the oversight of both the state and the city Historic Preservation Agency, as well as the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. After the MTA vacated the site and this initial phase of archaeological studies were completed, EDC and the speaker brought together the Bus Depot Task Force, which is comprised of members of Community Board 11, as well as other stakeholders of the community, as well as representatives from the borough president. The goal of the Bus Depot Task Force was to develop goals for the recently vacated site. So through multiple meetings over a couple of years, the Bus Depot Task Force produced project goals that called for a number of things, including a permanent outdoor memorial and cultural center, development of mixed use, enhanced streetscape and pedestrian connection, and the advancement of a financially feasible project that can support the continuous operation of the memorial and cultural center associated with it. The reasonable development scenario and the program for the project that we develop as a result of the conversation around these goals really reflect these multiple objectives. The reasonable worst-case development scenario includes a permanent outdoor memorial on the historical footprints of the burial ground, with restriction ensuring that the 18,000 square feet of space remain open to the sky and unbuilt. In addition, the program calls for up to 15,000 square feet of indoor memorial cultural center space that work alongside the outdoor component. Approximately 2/3 of the total development is expected to be housing, and the rest, about 300,000 square feet, will be job-creating commercial space. Maximizing affordable housing is a key goal of the administration for this project. So to that end, we've committed that 20% of the site residential unit be affordable to families earning no more than 30% of the AMI. That was a key goal that was established as part of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and we're following that key goal with that commitment. As the project moves through public review process, we'll continue to refine the affordability program overall. I want to address questions around the sequencing of the projects, because I know that was something that was discussed at the original review session, because we are seeking land use approval before releasing an RFP for the site. Given the complexity and the unique archaeological history, the project obviously comes with particular challenges and sensitivity. We believe that securing land use approval beforehand and advancing the memorial project will lead to stronger responses from the development community. And we're concerned that just putting an RFP without having a fully formed memorial project or more evidence on archaeology would lead to a failed RFP, which would have been a really bad outcome for so many years of advocacy. This approach also allows the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force to plan for the future memorial. We've recently hired Lord Cultural Resources, and they're here to answer any question. They're a world-renowned cultural planning consultant group. They're working with the Burial Ground Task Force to develop an implementation plan for the memorial that includes a budget, a mission, and a vision. So this project has been developed through years of community advocacy and input. ADC is just coming at the very tail end of decade-long of work. We're committed to continuing this productive dialogue through meaningful engagement with the community board. And we've committed to include a blind briefing that would allow the community board to help provide input into both the writing of the RFP as well as the ultimate decision of the developer. So we're very much engaged into a continuous process that allows the community board, the community, certainly the African Burial Ground Task Force and the Bus Depot Task Force to have input into the ultimate project. And in addition, the 384B4 process would allow for a number of parties, including the community board, the council member, the board president, the borough board, to have input into the final program. So in closing, I just want to say that we're very humbled to have the opportunity to really be part of this project. This is an incredible opportunity to honor the past of East Harlem and New York City while providing for the present and the future need of this community. And we very much look forward to continue our partnership with the African Burial Ground Task Force, the Bus Depot Task Force, and the speaker in moving forward. So I'll take all the questions I can, but there are also members of the team who have particular knowledge about the technicalities of archaeology and the work with the Burial Ground Task Force, so I may ask them to come with me to help them answer questions.
Thank you. Questions from the Commissioner. Vice Chair Nichols.
Thank you. Cecilia, with regard to the cultural space and the burial ground, who would operate the cultural space and who would maintain the African burial ground? Are those responsibilities expected to be lodged in one entity, or would they be separate?
I think these exact questions are the one we're trying to resolve through the process that we began by engaging Lord Consulting Services with the Burial Ground Task Force. The idea is really to craft the mission, understand the operating needs and budget that would result from the type of activities that the Burial Ground Task Force would want to do in the cultural space and in the outdoor memorial, and from there, defining the best partners, if you will, existing organization that can help kind of support and operationalize the memorial, as well as understand the actual financial and operational implications for the project of being able to have to sustain financially the cultural space. So what we're really trying is to answer that very precise questions in the coming months.
Commissioner Efron.
Similarly, is there any thought to how to craft the RFP so that the site location, which is determined by the burial ground, obviously, and it's First Avenue, but it's First Avenue plus an additional space that's been annexed to the block, so it's a really long block.
Right.
How you're going to attract the public down to that end of First Avenue, given that it's an extra specially long block?
Yeah, I think, so there are two components to the memorial. One is really operational, and we're engaged in that part. And then there's another one that will really be design, right? Which is what will be the design process to create the memorial as a physical space, and how do we make sure that the overall project, make it visible, works well with the memorial, so they're like one block and one entity. So I think the Burial Ground Task Force has begun to draft design guiding principles, and we will want to embed those in the RFP and continue this design process for them. So when we issue the RFP, we have clear language that make these types of issues specific goals, and looking to the development community and their designers to really respond to that.
And I just want to note, as I'm sure you are already, but the three smaller parks just to the south of it seem like a real opportunity
That's
to
right.
create an
That's
engaging
right.
space
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
really
Yeah.
is a central green space for the whole neighborhood over there, which doesn't have a lot of green space along
That's
that.
right. So I think like one of the things that's particularly interesting with that site is that today it's a fairly isolated site, but with the amount of development that is really city conducted, that is around it, as well as the fact that the Parks Department is going through conceptual design for a new esplanade on the waterfront, the site will really be, through our project as well as everything else that the city is doing around it, like restitched into East Harlem. And so there's a lot of work to be done to really think from an urban design perspective, how does one do that successfully? And that's certainly part of things we want to embody in the RFP, and that will be part of judging the responses.
So I just want to follow up a bit on Deputy Chair Knuckles' question and make sure I understand. So the next stage with Lord Consulting Services is really to think through the feasibility and what's the sustainability of the cultural space and the memorial and what's needed.
That's right.
So has the future relationship, financial relationship, between the redeveloped portion and the cultural and memorial portion been outlined? And what are the parameters, what's the status, and how will one inform the other?
Sure. The goal, and that was embedded in the goals of the Bus Depot Task Force, is that the project be financially sustainable, so that the other non-memorial, non-cultural center component of the project be able to financially sustain the operation, the maintenance of the memorial, the outdoor component, as well as the cultural center. So in order to be able to achieve this goal, our first step is to understand what would be the operational cost and capital cost associated with such a memorial and cultural center. So that's our first step in answering that question. But that's the framework that we're trying to achieve here.
If I may. So obviously, there are three things then in the future that can help sustain that, right? One is determined by density, the other is the level of affordability that exists in the project, and then the types of uses. So, I mean, we have parameters here, though, about what those could be. Is it envisioned that the parameters that we have here are close enough to what will be needed in the future to sustain the project?
That's where we think we're headed right now, yes. So we think the broad parameters and the broad program of the project and the level of density that we have is one that can afford to have a financially sustainable project.
And the level of affordability on the housing side that the community also wants.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Other questions from the commission? Commissioner Levin.
Cecile, I think you've sort of halfway answered what's on my mind, and you certainly acknowledged the concern that I raised at certification, which is this is an unusual project to come before this commission, because typically a project with this complexity would come to us with a much more developed program, so that we would know more about what we were authorizing to have happen. But here, our role is really reduced to a rezoning and a text amendment to require mandatory inclusionary housing, and then an authorization to the rest of the city to go see if you can find a developer and make it happen. You correctly pointed out that the other stakeholders here will have ample opportunity to participate in the planning of this important site through ultimately the 384B4 process. But we don't have that opportunity. This is our one and only chance to understand what's going to happen here. And so that's a conundrum for us, I think, because we have no control, assuming this is approved. It's essentially a blank check to EDC to go find a developer and build a project. And that concerns me on a project of this scale. Is there anything that you can say that would make me feel better about that?
I can try. Sure. I mean, so it is true that typically when we issue RFPs or when we need land use approval as part of facilitating a project, we generally issue RFPs in advance of going for seeking land use approval. It's not always the case, though. We make that decision based on the particulars of each site and the needs of each site. And the goal is always twofold. One, making sure that the land use approvals are appropriate within the context of the surrounding development and for the purpose of the site, as well as ensuring that we actually have a successful RFP where the development community is truly competing and giving the city and the community the best project it can receive. When we looked here at this site, we really truly believed, based on the archaeological findings, the fact that the memorial was a really informed project, that we're really helping the Bail Grant Task Force move along, that we would not have a successful RFP, that the development community, seeing the sensitivity and the complexity of this project, in addition to the fact that they did not have land use approval, would have steered away from it. And so the decision we made was to make sure that we set up the project the best it can be, so we actually have true competition and as many responses as we can that then allow the community elected officials to be able to look at the best opportunity for the project. I just want to say that we're committed to more than 384B4. We want to work closely with the community board in helping crafting the RFP. There will be a blind briefing on the responses that we receive. Their input will help the ultimate decisions that we make. So it is not just we will come back. Like this project really only came to us because of long-term community advocacy. We don't expect that it's possible for us to disappear, issue an RFP, make a decision, and for everyone that has been part of making this site actually a project have input into it. So we're certainly committed to that.
Yeah, no, I certainly appreciate that there is very good reason for you to be proceeding as you are, and that the reality is if this administration disappears, it's going to take a very long time to get this project underway. There will be changes and twists and turns. That this community will remain focused like a laser on being sure that this happens, but that's an informal civic process that we have to have confidence in here. And I guess to the notion that you're asking us to just authorize disposition according to zoning, I would wonder if our disposition could somehow be tied to the broad programmatic parameters that Commissioner Delahousse referred to. I think it's our responsibility to know that we're disposing of it not just for whatever could be built under zoning, but for generally what was described to us as hoped for on this site.
I'd like to add in on that the overlay of the East Harlem rezoning, which has been certified and is out for community review right now. And at the time of certification, Commissioner Levin did mention that it would be helpful, as we've had in previous neighborhood rezonings, to have the cultural assets of the neighborhood we are rezoning. I would add to that things like an East River Esplanade that may or may not be in programming. So I go into this, I will admit, not knowing the full scope of what is going on in the context of community review of the rezoning, and this sits right squarely in it. So it feels like a little bit of a cart and course, issue, not just on the RFP question, but also on the rezoning. And perhaps as a representative of EDC who has a foot in both this project and the rezoning, if there's anything more you could give us on what is going on in the immediately surrounding neighborhood that's up for grabs, so to speak, right now, it might be very helpful.
Yeah. So I think in general, as we talked to Community Board 11, the speaker staff through this project, the African Burial Ground Task Force, it was very clear, as you said, that like that site is part of the overall East Harlem neighborhood transformation and changes that are coming through. However, it was also very much acknowledged that the history of that site really predates the notion of an East Harlem rezoning and is really coming through because of the tireless advocacy of a number of people. Literally for the last 15 years, I've been saying there is a burial ground on this site and something needs to be done to recognize that history and that significance. So in that respect, what we've tried to do is balance the longer history of the site coming to fruition and advance it like in its own, with its own like pace and sense of urgency, because this history has been going on for such a long time, while at the same time looking to the East Harlem neighborhood plan and talking to the community board and elected official about the things that we could do on that site that really were in line with the goals that the community determined were the right goals, which is why, for example, like the affordable housing commitment we met at the onset was one that was like truly at the core of the East Harlem neighborhood plan, and so we thought that we had an opportunity here to be very responsive. So as these process continues and as this dialogue continues with Community Board 11, with elected officials, certainly, as there are more priorities that are coming through the East Harlem rezoning, we have an opportunity here, to be able to be responsive to some, while at the same time, again, trying to get a financially feasible project that really support the long-term sustainability of a memorial. So it's in balance of all these goals that we're like operating here.
Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi. The idea that the RFP is or I should say the land use approvals are coming before the RFP, I think is interesting. I mean, is it fair to say that, respondents are somewhat skittish at times if the approvals have not been received, and so that squelches your response rate, and doing it this way, perhaps, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just sort of trying to think it through logically, that you'll have more competitive responses as a result, and it won't be limited to the few who are comfortable with this land use process that perhaps will get a better deal as a city in response. I mean, is that fair to say? And are there other instances where you've done the RFP, concurrent with land use versus the land use approvals before? I mean, are you able to say anecdotally whether that's the case?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, we have a number of projects where we went through EULA prior to doing an RFP. Seward Park was a really kind of famous one in Manhattan. Again, highly politically sensitive, so wanting to clear land use approvals so that the development community had a sense that this project was actually being able to move forward. So here, that's certainly the case as well. Again, like, we think that the best deal for any community is a competitive RFP where we actually have a number of developers competing around program. Like, this is how you get the most, the best deals on affordability, against term sheets for the city, the best programming, the best cultural activity. So that's certainly our goal. And as I said, again, like, the neighborhood is changing dramatically. So the RFP will come after the end of the East Harlem rezoning process. There's a number of projects that would be like completed here. And so just the context of the site will be dramatically different as well. Like, today it is a fairly isolated site. In just a year and a half, it will be like very different and much better positioned to get positive responses. So yes, again, we really make the determination on a project-by-project basis, and really always trying to get the best deal for the city and for the community.
Thank
you. Okay, thank you. We now have a number of speakers who are registered. If I could ask Diane Collier.
And can I just make sure, Sharon Wilkins was the member of the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force. We signed her up as part of the applicant team, but we would want to make sure that she has the opportunity to come and testify in front of the commission, if that's okay with you. Thank you very much.
We will add you at the end. No, oh, sorry. If we could, we will add her at the end. Thank you. Oh, okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. Diane Collier, Chair of Community Board 11. When EDC first presented this 126th Street bus depot, the project had plenty of goals, but many, many uncertainties. No developer, no proposed layout, no financials, and then an RFP that would be issued after the ULURP is completed. Clearly, the members voiced apprehension on working on this project, especially with so many unknowns, and giving approval to a cart before the horse application. But as you will hear so eloquently from Sharon, the village of Harlem began right here in East Harlem, and that we are extremely proud of. And we also knew that a community of color and their stories, which had been disturbed and forgotten over 300 years, was buried at this consecrated site. And now CB11 were to make a recommendation for the new uses in the 21st century. I can tell you, there were voices in the board and outside of the board to preserve it as parkland and to preserve it as sacred land. But that would be a perfect world, and we know we don't live in a perfect world, and we live in a very shrinking Manhattan Island. So the task before the board was to determine a solution that honored this site, these forgotten souls, while addressing the current concerns of our community: affordable housing, economic opportunities, closing the income gap, as I'm sure the ancestors would have wanted us to do. So I can clearly say, and as you will see in our scoping comments, CB11 stepped up to the task. Our scoping comments went from 2 sentences to 5 pages and clearly laid out our intent. Our new members joined the task force and participated in every meeting and reported back to the board. We had numerous presentations, to the point, Sharon, that I think that they can even do the presentation at this point. And at every committee, it was an agenda item to be discussed so that until the final vote. On a late April full board meeting, 10:30 at night, CB11 voted yes with 11 conditions. We had 27 versus 1 opposed and 2 abstained. You will note in our submission, and I'm not going to go through all of it, we remain true to our East Harlem neighborhood plan goals and values: 100% affordability, local hiring. But we built upon 2 essential provisions that was critical to our decision. The first we start with: ensure that this project honors, protects, and sustains the sanctity and the cultural history of the African burial ground at this site. And that CB11 remains and continues to have an official and meaningful role throughout the RFP process, the final design, and implementation thereof. I've heard the speech. I thank you, and we're going to hold you to that we remain a portion of it. And it's on record at this point. I want to thank Reverend Singletary, who's not here, and of course Sharon and all the task force for their perseverance to the cause. This has been going on for more than 10 years since I've been on the board, and even longer than that. I want to thank the Madam Speaker for her commitment to the task force and providing the funds for the archaeological study that confirmed these souls were there and they still are there. And I want to thank EDC and the Manhattan Borough President for engaging the community throughout the entire process. And we will hold you to it, that you continue to engage with us throughout the entire process. So I thank you, and I pray that you vote yes on this as well. Any questions? I stayed within the 3 minutes. I'm proud of that. I really am proud of that. Any
And
questions?
thank you, Ms. Collier, for both addressing the commission and the applicant. Now, questions from the commission?
I do
Yes.
want to, yes.
Commissioner
Yes,
Delos.
Michelle.
How are you? Thank you
I'm
for
fine.
being here, and thank you again for coming. You're a frequent visitor.
Yeah,
We like
I
we like
tried.
seeing and hearing from you. I really wanted to actually zero in maybe on the 11th point. in terms of ensuring that the commitments are part of a point of agreement. Are you envisioning that as something that is a separate community benefits agreement or community agreement with, talk a little bit more about how you're envisioning that?
The goal of the Land Use Committee was, as I said, the community board as well, wanted to ensure that we would remain a part of the process. And often the way you do that is to make a contract. Now, unfortunately, we don't have contracts in working with the city, but what we do have is points of agreements and mutual benefits. So that is why we put that language in there, to get everyone to start thinking. As you pointed out, this is going to take some time. The people that are here today may not be there down the road. We want to make sure that whoever is taking over will make sure that they are included in the process. So does that answer?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there have been points of agreement that have been included with the city and other actions, so it wouldn't be the first time.
But this is so sensitive, Michelle.
Oh, I agree.
This is in the middle of a community of color. I cannot see this going away at this point. This is something that must be honored, and there are a lot of people very interested. To Ken's remark about who is going to manage all of that, we're still developing. Clearly that the task force that began with it, who has the archives, they are going to be an essential part of it. And as part of our agreement, you will note that we asked them to engage with other cultural institutions in the Harlem area and beyond to help them with the operations of the particular unit. And to your point, Anna, yes, it was very contentious in the beginning. But the most important thing, as we really deliberated, was the fact that the burial ground was tied to this. And for us to say no to the burial ground just wasn't in our hearts to say it emotionally. So we had to find a solution. And hopefully we found a good one.
Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Collier? Thank you very much.
Oh, Joseph has one.
I was just going to add a comment and say that, with your involvement, I have a certain level of comfort that they will follow through on.
Oh, my. Well, thank you very much. And they know very well that they will be following through. They have dealt with me many times. So thank you.
I'm comforted by that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving us comfort.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Our next speaker in support is Michael Lipko.
Hi, Commissioners. How are you doing? I see, the Burial Ground Task Force and EDC and my community board for asking me to echo some of the sentiments that sort of summarize what happened at the community board meeting. And Diane speaks so eloquently about the overall picture, the legacy, the importance, some of the emotional conflicts for the community. But I want to speak a little bit about the economic development that I know people like Edwin and Kenneth and Hope have worked so hard to do for Harlem. And East Harlem really has not seen the kind of development that we have in West Harlem that really has helped to have a thriving, integrated community. And as they spoke about, the city is doing a lot to invest in that area. And there's really going to be a wonderful transformation there. And we think that this project really balances, in an important way, the history and the future of what's happening in Harlem that can allow for a thriving overall 125th Street corridor. So if you think about the project I was just here for on Monday, our project at Harlem, and as Diane and I speak about this, we want to sort of bookend from a cultural and arts perspective what can happen in East Harlem. So one is bring commerce, energy, excitement, history, passion, more east with our project, but then also allow that energy to carry all the way through. And so, keeping with their promise, I've already engaged with the speaker and their consultants, and myself and other arts organizations have already started talking about how we can weave all these exciting things that are happening, from Transit Hub on 125th Street, to the hospital, to Columbia, all these different things. And so it's really been 25 years of work to try and get Harlem in a place that it can be really synonymous with not just the history of the Renaissance and the arts and the culture, but also something that's vibrant and active today. And that's going to take investment and courage and bravery on the part of the city to make hard choices so that we can really activate the entire corridor and see something special really happen there. And I think from our perspective, outside of the obvious things about honoring our ancestors and the obvious things about showing the entire country what the contribution of Black folks has been and how long we have been on that sacred spot, there's also an economic benefit and a cultural benefit that I think is important to memorialize and consecrate across that entire corridor. So when you think about what the city's actually putting forth there, and I know it doesn't always work in coordination, but you're talking about a big metro stop and big hospital and a big university and hotels and the state and the city. So all these resources are starting to come together to really build an integrated, vibrant, dynamic 125th Street. And this spot is an important cultural anchor in the same way that Columbia University on the other side is an important anchor. And that's really what you're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Lippincott?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Our next speaker in support is Tamara Rivera.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. I wasn't planning to speak. My name is Tamara Rivera. I know the area. I'm from Inwood. I was on my community board for 7 years, and I'm very passionate with what I do. I'm a carpenter in the union. The only thing I just want to say, it is a sensitive issue, and I respect it to the utmost. Whatever happens, if you decide to develop, please think about having responsible general contractors, responsible subcontractors. We just lost, well, not lost, somebody just fell yesterday, 30 feet on 15th Street. It's like a domino effect. I don't know what's going on. I can tell you my version. You know, everybody deserves to have proper training, to have fair wages with benefits. People that say, build my vision, that's very easy to say. Here are the documents, build it. But nobody really puts themselves in our shoes to see the wear and tear to build it. I've had surgeries on my shoulder, both knees. It's just wear and tear. But with the benefits and the good wages, we're back on our feet, and we're back. We have representation when you're in the union. I don't want Harlem to suffer because of lack of. When we make more, we spend more, and we need to be spending more in Harlem. We need careers, not just jobs. I'm an organizer now. I'm a proud organizer. I'm the first female, Latina, gay organizer in the largest trade of the country, carpenters. That's a big deal. So when I go out there, my heart is out there. The women that are working out there are holding the stop signs, slow signs, and flagging. It's not the same. That's not a skill. You know we're worth more. You're all sitting there. You know, you ladies too. They deserve, and just real quick, because I know my time is running out, we on our side are being more progressive. We're now recruiting the skilled concrete workers and interior workers that are doing non-union, that are not getting the fair wages, that are not getting represented. So we've already hired over 200. We want to do more. But we need the community to understand, to stand up and say enough is enough. Proper skill is proper skill. Don't pay the $60 for an OSHA car and they don't know what they're doing. And they need to work, but we got to protect them. So that's all, just, you know, and I understand the sensitivity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ms. Rivera. Would you mind waiting for some questions from the commissioners? Thank you. Commissioner Ortiz.
Not a question, so much more so a statement. We get a lot of union representatives coming to speak, and I think that, you know, what you said right now was among the most compelling statements
Thank
that
you.
I've heard.
I'm sorry I'm a little emotional, but it's happening. The past 2 years, 33 people have died. 2 of them were union. Yeah, accidents do happen, but 2. I mean, come on. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
now the speaker that we've all been waiting for, Sharon Wilkins.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Wilkins. I'm a registered public historian and a member of the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force Executive Committee. For almost 10 years, there has been strategic collaborations and partnerships, information gathering, research, cross-disciplinary dialogue and exchange, community engagement, and institutional fact-finding has been our process. The proposed Memorial and Cultural Center affords the City of New York an opportunity to preserve a uniquely historic treasure, the significance of which is both a repeatedly desecrated and long-forgotten sacred colonial cemetery, traditionally known as the Negro Burying or Harlem African Burial Ground, and over 350 years of local and national history begun in the iconic, internationally recognized village of Harlem. Acceptance is growing for the undeniable fact that American history is woefully incomplete without the benefits of African American history. The skill, ingenuity, intellect, tenacity, labor, linguistic agility, and other attributes possessed by Black people were crucial to building the infrastructure, culture, society, and economy, both of this city and the entire nation. Honoring their lives and sharing their compelling and important stories will be made possible through the actualization of this project. Community residents representing varying perspectives, ethnic and national origins, and economic and social strata will have the capacity to come together for information, education, enlightenment, inspiration, and spiritual uplift within the context of exhibitions, lectures, performances, workshops, conferences, and events of the like scheduled for school-based and other local, domestic, and international audiences. The benefits of a memorial and cultural center were acknowledged prior to the start of ULUR. The intersection of history and archaeology and effective community collaboration won a third-place MAC Award. A National and Historic Register's designation is pending, and the project is already cited as part of the Historic Sites Dutch Mapping Project. Finally, with the project's close proximity to the waterfront and the economic and cultural corridor of 125th Street, we hope that this development will be iconic in its design, creative and progressive in its features and programs, distinct in its ability to honor history and culture, and forward-thinking in its capacity to become a destination, generating increased interest, economic viability, and tourism for East Harlem and the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. Questions? Commissioner Levin.
As I'm hearing testimony this morning, I'm mindful of the fact that right now we are sitting in another African burial ground, which is memorialized just to the north here with the federal site, but in fact covers this block, the block to the south, and several blocks to the north. And I'm curious about the relationship, and the National Historic Site to the north was certainly a struggle to get created, and a true victory when it was established, and is just a remarkable gem in this city that more people should know about, honestly. As I go by and see the guys in their Yogi Bear hats there every day, and with no one to talk to, I think what a shame that there aren't more people passing by. But I'm curious to know, so you obviously are the repository of a lot of history about African burial grounds in the city. I'm curious to know what relationship this memorial project might have to the national site next door here, and whether there are other African burial ground sites across the city that we ought to be aware of.
I think, well, I'll take your second question first. I think that obviously all across this nation, there are African burial ground sites that have not been discovered, or the discovery of which has been hidden for obvious reasons. I mean, the way to deal with, regrettably, such sites has been to pave them over with a parking lot, a park, or whatever. And unless there is an advocacy group or some, community voice that brings their history and their prominence and their sacredness to the fore, no one knows about it. I'm sure you're aware of the Hunts Point project up in the Bronx. So, you know, there are plans to certainly work together. We made a very conscious decision from day one that our collaborations were going to be, you know, strategic. We were going to have partnerships. We were going to collaborate. We were going to have community engagement of all kinds. So, you know, in 2011, CB11 designated us as the spokes agency for the burial ground. We've had town hall meetings. We worked with the Hunter College graduate students in urban planning to do, you know, a design charrette. So we've done all kinds of things, but that was our decision from the beginning because we're all a group of professionals that have come together to donate our time for this.
Commissioner Deleuze.
Thank you for being here. And that was actually my question. So you all have been doing this really as commitment and passion personally. Is there a formal organization that exists, and is that part of the process with the Lord Consulting Services is to envision how what has been a volunteer effort can evolve into something more formal?
Yeah, we are a formal executive committee, but obviously the operations and to sustain this has to move to a next level. So part of our engagement with Lord is just to identify those kinds of issues. Certainly we've thought about it,
Sure.
and now we have to get down to the details.
Gotcha. Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Wilkins.
Thank you so much.
We don't have any other registered speakers, but if there is anyone present who would want to be heard, please raise your hand. Okay, if not, the record on this matter is going to remain open for 10 days to receive comments on the draft environmental impact statement, and that will be through Monday, June 19th of this year. And with that, the hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 27, CD4 N170317ZRM, a public hearing in the matter of an application for the zoning text amendment concerning the Manhattan West Phase 3 text amendment.
Our first speaker on this issue will be Sabrina Kovner. We'll just wait a moment as people exit and enter.
That's AKRF.
Okay, thank you.
You made it.
I made it. Good morning. Waiting in the other room. So good morning. I'm Sabrina Canner, Executive Vice President of Design and Construction for Brookfield Properties. And we're here today to present a text amendment for our Manhattan West site, which is intended to clarify some aspects of our public space and further define others. I'd like to start off with a brief update on the status of the Manhattan West project today. The site is bordered by 9th and 10th Avenues and 31st and 33rd Streets. Our platform over the center tracks was completed at the end of 2014 and now serves as a construction protection over the active tracks, as well as our staging for construction of the towers. When the project is completed, the platform is our parking and loading level for the complex. The southwest site is our multifamily residential building, also known as the Eugene, and has opened with TCOs through the 32nd floor and is leasing quite well. Our first affordable tenants to move in will move in this month, and we expect the tower to attain final completion this fall. Amenities that have been completed to date include a regulation-sized basketball court, a climbing wall, children's crash pad, a library, a dog spa, and a fitness center. A Bluestone coffee shop opening onto both the lobby and to 31st Street will be opening in a few weeks. Our renovated 450 West 33rd Street, now known as 5 Manhattan West, is substantially completed and office space is completely leased. The building has much improved daylight, elevatoring, mechanical systems, and an ADA accessible lobby. The breezeway, a carve-out of what was formerly office space on the south side of the second and third floors to create open space, is complete with public seating and trees and will be open to public as soon as utility work is completed at the sidewalk entrance. We have a signed lease with Whole Foods for 60,000 square feet, an amenity for the community, and are in negotiations with a large innovative fitness provider for this building as well. In addition, we plan to open a market hall that in character will be somewhere between Hudson Eats at Brookfield Place and Chelsea Market. 2 restaurants and a coffee shop will round out the offerings at 5 Manhattan West, and this retail will all be open by early 2020. Our Northeast Tower, a 2.1 million square foot commercial office building, is well underway. The concrete core is constructed up to the 18th floor. Steel framing is being erected at the 10th floor, and curtain wall will commence this fall. The building has 2 leases signed, and we are in discussions with 3 others. When those deals conclude, we'll be 85% leased. The lobby will be surrounded by 45-foot high glass, mirroring the scale of the Moynihan Arches across 9th Avenue. The core will be clad in 3-dimensionally carved travertine, and the sidewalls will be contoured zebrano wood forms resembling a handcrafted hull of a giant ship. We are currently on track to complete third quarter 2019. The Southeast Tower, a 1.9 million square foot commercial office tower and a sister in form to the Northeast Tower, is in design as well. We are working with the railroads to commence the platform under the building this month. The tower itself will require an anchor tenant, but we are in early discussions with several tenants for this building, and given the leasing activity on the Northeast site, we believe we'll be underway imminently with this building and plan to deliver and occupy in 2022. We are in design on the Northwest site, which will be a 200,000 square foot boutique hotel with 8 floors of condominium residences on top. We plan to begin construction on this site early spring of 2018 and will complete June of 2021. The Loft Building, or 434 West 33rd Street, was our final acquisition to complete the Manhattan West site in its entirety. We're upgrading the mechanical, life safety, and BMS systems, as well as making structural changes to allow ADA access into the lobby.
I think there'll be a chance to continue with questions from the commission. Yes, Commissioner Reade.
Hi, Sabrina, could you go through a few more of the changes that you're planning to make on the site?
A few more of
To change the-
the text amendment.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm going to introduce Kim Van Holzbecker from Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, who will go through some of the technical aspects of the text amendment.
Are there other questions, though, first for Ms. Kovner from the commission? Okay, over to you. Thank you.
So the text amendments are really refinements of the text that was written a couple of years ago. They really define all the public spaces of the 2 acres of open space that is provided on the Manhattan West side. Within that, as we developed the design, there was some text amendments that we wanted to refine to make sure that we can accommodate the uses and the event spaces that we're envisioning that we discussed with city planning. And the text amendments are there to basically make sure that they are written in the text and we can accommodate to them. There's 3 main items that the text clarifies. First one is the signage location, just throughout the site, signage of the entry into a public space. Second one, circulation on the Southeast Tower, specific location where we couldn't build the building to comply with all the criteria and it would have reduced the amount of public space. And the third one is the event plaza, which is a program I just mentioned we want to achieve to activate the Central Plaza. The very first, going through them, is the entry blocks in the larger Manhattan West public space. The current text would require an entry plaque every 20 feet, which would really clutter the sidewalk with more objects. So we amended the text to accommodate locations where they made sense, and they made wayfinding very easy. Basically at all the corners and entry points into the site, 31st, 9th Avenue in the center, as well as 31st Street. Right here where Dyer Avenue platform gets covered. At the bottom of the stair that connects up to the upper plaza as well on the top. And then on the 33rd Street and 10th Avenue, where again there's a stair and elevator access at the top and the bottom. The signage would basically follow the guidelines of typical pop signage throughout the site. In addition, we have 2 information plaques within the Central Plaza, just again highlighting it's a public space, it's open, and what time of day it's accessible. So that's the first amendment. The second amendment is as part of the public space in the Central Plaza, there is a required circulation space along the front of the buildings. As you know, this building is built on top of rail tracks, so where we can bring structure down has limitations. Right here at the southeast corner, the circulation has to be open to the sky, but where we can bring down our columns to the track would require a small non-compliance. And to comply with that one structure, we cannot do it because it's the only place where we can bring structure down. And in reality, we would have to reduce and pull the building footprint further north. So this is actually providing more public space. That's the second one. And then the last one is really about activating the public space at large. And in the original text, we had in the 2 acres, there's one zone that's called out as the event plaza. And the intent was to be more open and flexible to be able to use for regular conditions with tables and chairs and kiosks, but then also allow for special events, summer event and winter event. Like we see throughout the city in existing parks, and Brookfield has a history of operating both in Brookfield Place downtown, as well as at the Grace Building, the plaza right there, and activating. So the goal was to allow for those things that we had discussed. And
I think I'll ask Commissioner Eady's question and ask you to describe
Okay.
the event plaza.
So one of the very specific one was the ice skating ring, which was again discussed with city planning because they asked how can we activate it in the winter? How do you bring people out to 2 acres of public space? So ice skating ring used throughout the city very much as an idea. The baseline configuration is in the text, nothing changes. It's basically tables and chairs, kiosks, movable in that zone. The summer event was refined in, this is an existing use and allowed for events like farmers markets. That is, tents could be occupied, could be arts fairs, etc. in this larger 4,500 square feet event zone. The alternate that was specified in the text, again, was described but not specifically, and the diagram is submitted, is a summer public event. These are events publicly accessible to the public, and there we basically are describing where the event would take place. We have a stage and the opportunity to put seating there, which goes slightly past the 4,500 because of configuration. So there was amendments to make sure that this was able to accommodate during those conditions. And then the winter event is an ice skating rink, basically again in the event plaza, an ice skating rink, and a tent structure where you would rent your skates, change, leave your bags, as well as some of the support space that comes along with a ice skating event. Those are the changes.
Question? Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Just because of recent events in large public gatherings in other cities around the world, I am curious whether the space has any configuration for additional security plan since it comes off of an open plaza, the space for special events in the summer particularly.
What do you?
Is there adequate space for a secure entrance to?
So all these events are not really fenced off. They're open to the public. That's the intention. Those are not intended to be fenced off so people can move in and out. The requirements throughout the Center Plaza of clear circulation paths that run east-west to allow people to go through is maintained in all of these events. So
I'm afraid we're not able to have speakers return a second
You
time.
can submit something in writing
Yes.
if there's a way to deal with that question. Thank you. And then I just had one other question
Of course.
about how many days a year are you allowed to be closed for private events? Maybe you could submit that too. I think it's in the original agreement, but
I actually note that we have both Ken Lowenstein and Barack Robel available to answer questions.
So I'm
if
sure
either
when
would
the
like
time
to.
comes.
So, my name is Ken Lowenstein. So, in response to your question, Commissioner, they will handle security through their operational, where they operate these events. They have standard procedures that they use in Brooklyn Place, and they'll implement similar operational procedures here.
Thank you.
Are you able to answer the number of days as well?
The number of days it's closed for private events?
Well, there's a provision in the text that allows it to be closed for up to 12 days, subject to a declaration approved by the chair. We'll be working with the department on that declaration, but it is not yet been submitted to the department for its review.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
So is the idea that the event space will be
essentially programmed at all times. During the winter season, I guess once the ice skating rink is erected, it's there for the season. That's not a thing you take up and put down.
Right.
Put up and take down.
Correct.
It's just going to be there for the skating season. Is
For
the
the
same true during the summer, or is that a more flexible arrangement? And are there times of the day when it's not being used, when it will just be available for passive seating?
Right. So you're correct in the winter. The winter will be, as ice skating rink is set up for the winter and for the winter season to bring people out. The summer events are more occasional. There might be weekend, there might be day. And this here is really the standard configuration, which is just movable tables and chairs.
Okay, so that remains. The
That will-
movable tables and chairs remains as a possible use when there's not
Right.
an
correct.
event.
That is the configuration when there's no event.
Okay.
Because it's required per the text.
So, yeah, and okay, I just want to be sure that requirement remains, and the special, the alternate arrangements you're showing will just be occasional.
Correct.
Yes, Commissioner O'Keefe.
Hi, how is the maintenance of this space and the continual programming of the space being funded? Is that by the developer?
Correct.
Yes.
Other questions? Thank you. Those are all of the registered speakers. I'll ask if there is anyone else here who would want to be heard on the item. If not, the hearing is closed. Thank you.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 28 and 29. Calendar number 28, CD2, C170192ZSM. Calendar number 29, C170193 ZSM. A public hearing in a matter of application for the grant of special permits concerning 462 Broadway.
Thank you. We have a number of speakers registered, and I just remind all speakers that comments are limited to 3 minutes. And we will start with Richard Lobel.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Once again, my name is Richard Lobel. I'm from the law firm of Sheldon Lobel PC. Good to see you. We're here today to present on 2 special permits with regards to 462 Broadway. My colleague Amanda Inati is putting up the plans and materials. The special permits are relating to 74922, which is the approval of a large retail development at the site. And the second special permit is the 74781 special permit, which relates to the ability to do commercial retail on the ground floor and cellar of a building in an M15B zoning district. So the applications have been at the commission for some time. And the applicant here has a building which is 6 stories. It is a building within the historic district. It is a valued landmark building. And the special permit here would allow the use of the ground floor and cellar for retail purposes in compliance with Article 4 of the zoning resolution. The special permit findings with regards to the good faith marketing have been met by the applicant. There was a series of meetings with the department. We came in repeatedly over that time, probably at least 4 times. And after one effort at good faith marketing with regards to a certain price, the price was further adjusted over time in order to meet the department's goals. And so the good faith marketing proceeded in accordance with the timelines. The conversations that we've had with the community and even at the borough president's office, they recognize the fact that we did meet the good faith marketing requirements with regards to the period of the marketing. With regards to the space and with regards to the utilization of the space, we did offer the space for permitted uses. That was done extensively. The materials contain extensive examples of the agreements that we entered into, the different communications that were made. So with regards to the technical requirements of the rule, we definitely met those requirements. Moreover, the large retail special permit here has a series of detailed findings, and those primarily relate to the ability of the large scale to operate at the site without disruption to the local area, particularly in regards to traffic and in regards to pedestrians, the ability to integrate into the local community. I would note here that there's been a lot of attention with regards to large retail. This was noted at the Commission's review session. And really, much of this attention is focused on bad actors. It's focused on large retail, which has begun operating in the city without the appropriate approvals. And that operation and those operations have been the subject of Department of Buildings violations. We want to be clear here that the applicant has proceeded in good faith and has also operated in the right way. They basically came to the commission in an effort to meet the detailed findings of the special permit. And so while much of the discussion with the community centered around these large retail operations that were done without special permit, we would note that we're not those actors, that we basically did this the right way, and that you can really differentiate when you're looking at this type of retail in Soho between two types of actors. Ones who ignore the legal process and basically attempt to open, and we understand the ramifications of that. I'm sorry, okay, may I finish my statement? Thank you, we understand the ramifications of that. What I'd like to focus on, though, is that the large scale on this site.
I'm sorry, Mr. LaBelle.
Oh, please, that's fine, thank you, Chair.
I'm certain there'll be questions.
I'm sure.
Questions from the commission. Commissioner Irfan.
Yes, since you acknowledged the community board's
Sure.
finding that most of the large-scale retail was actually done by illegal conversion or
Correct.
inappropriately, perhaps you can talk to why your client believes this is appropriate.
Thank you, Commissioner Efron. So the reason we would view this as appropriate is because there are select applications which were approved by this commission. Specifically, since 2002, there have been 3 applications approved by the commission, one on 610 Broadway and one on 550 Broadway. And so when you look at those applicants and you look at other large retail within the 600-foot radius, those operate absent any complaints. When you look at 610 Broadway, there are no complaints. And when you look at 550 Broadway, there are no complaints. This is public record on DOB filings. When you look at certain stores that along Broadway that are operating legally, they operate with minimal complaints. And so these other bad actors really are ones who are violating the system and operate with many complaints, but we don't want to be those actors. We'd like to come in, and the reason that we came in on the large scale is to submit to the system and to basically demonstrate that we meet the findings of the special permit and should be allowed to operate at the site.
Other questions? Commissioner Ortiz.
I note that, the community board has requested a denial of eating and drinking establishment and late night uses, and I'm not leading in one direction or another.
Sure.
I actually understand that retail is changing quite rapidly, and that more traditional, department stores, for instance, are struggling. These larger spaces are struggling, and that eating and drinking establishments are actually doing very well in comparison. And so it strikes me that potentially is a challenge, and that the space itself is, what you plan to do with it might change as a reaction to what's happening in the industry. Could you speak to that and what your plans are for the space and how you feel about this request?
Thank you, Commissioner Ortiz. So you're correct. There is a rapidly changing landscape in the area. One of the difficult points on this special permit is that we're not permitted to go out. We're not permitted to find a tenant here. In fact, should we do so, it's looked down upon. And so we're unable to engage in specific conversations as far as who's going to be using this space. However, what we would note, which was noted by Mr. Johnson at the review session, is that ICC, the International Culinary Center, operated here for years. I believe it was over 20 years, 25 years. And there was an accessory restaurant on the ground floor. Despite the designation as a trade school, which it was legally operating pursuant to certificate of occupancy as a restaurant. And so at this site, where not just the ground floor, which would have consisted of 8,500, 9,000 square feet of restaurant space existed, but in the building itself, which had trade kitchens, which had test kitchens where there were constant deliveries to the site, constantly food being prepared in all these locations, we feel actually that a restaurant is particularly appropriate for the site. And so when I look at an application, I look at an applicant, and I look at their history of performing and operating at a site, you look at what's happened before, and you look at at whether or not they've just made things pretty for the application or whether or not they've really been operating in a certain manner. And here, there was a restaurant operating here for decades without major incident. And so I would, while I understand Community Board 2, I've been before them many times, particularly on side streets and applications involving smaller streets where there was opposition to restaurants. Here, we don't necessarily see it as an appropriate restriction.
May I follow up? So then, is it fair to say that space is outfitted with a kitchen and with ventilation to support an eating establishment at this time?
Well, should the special permit be granted, the basic mechanical systems would be in place in order to do that.
But they're there as a result of the previous use, is my question.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Since you're making a case that a good operator operates a space that is a good community player, does your client or any of its affiliates own any other retail that it operates in New York?
They own other sites within the city. I can have them address some of their other ownership. I know that one of the applicants will be standing up to speak, so that question may be more appropriately posed to them.
Great. I hope that we could do
Sure.
that and that we could have addresses. Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
Mr. Lobel, you mentioned two other sites that you said had received special permits, 610 Broadway and 510 Broadway, I
Correct.
think you said. Those are two addresses?
550 Broadway.
550. And what's at those locations?
An Adidas store is at 610 Broadway, and a Banana Republic is at 550 Broadway.
Ah, okay. Because I'm looking also at, the community board has a chart in their recommendation that I don't believe has either of those. Oh, no, I guess it's got the Banana Republic, but does not have the Adidas store. But they mentioned there's only been one.
I have
Special permit.
a special permit, calendar number 030134 ZSM, calendar number 090362 ZSM, and calendar number 140095 ZSM.
Could you just give us addresses for those?
Oh, sure. That is 610 Broadway, 550 Broadway, and 300 Lafayette, which I understand is not yet built.
Okay. And then could I just switch gears and ask, another avenue to a similar result, at least as far as retail use goes, would have been the 74-711
Correct.
Process, which would have obviated the need to discuss good faith marketing.
Sure.
Did your client consider a 74-711? That would have had the public benefit, maybe in hindsight would have been a faster process this time around, but it would have had for the public the not inconsiderable benefit of assuring preservation of this remarkable building
Right.
over the long haul. And we don't get that public benefit with a good faith marketing application.
Understood.
So could you help us understand why you chose this route versus that route?
Sure. I'd say first that without overloading the testimony of the owner, that I think he would be prepared to discuss the nature of the building and the fact that without any special permit or any additional requirements other than being in a historic district, they have voluntarily submitted to landmarks as far as improvements to the building and maintain the building in Class A condition. It is an impeccable building and it is a beauty and a treasure to the city. With regards to the special permit itself, as attorneys and attorneys in land use, we look at the nature of the relief that's desired and we look at the avenue to that relief. And whatever the discussion is with regards to good faith marketing, 74-781 provides the most direct response to a request for ground floor and cellar retail. It is basically the text of the special permit itself is geared towards this relief. And so while 74-711 can be used for that, the truth of the matter it can be used for a broad range of outcomes and a broad range of relief. And I think here that there was consideration on behalf of the applicant and that there has been a tremendous amount done to protect this building and is being done to protect the building, but I think that Rightly so, they felt that the text of this special permit is specifically designated for this use, and that's why they sought it.
Other questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Our next speaker will be Sandy Hornick.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Sandy Hornick. I'm a land use consultant with Sheldon Lobel PC. I probably have the longest relationship with Soho of anyone in this room, dating back to 1968 when I worked as a mailman in this neighborhood. And in the interim, I helped to shape the Soho regulations that we are applying under today. The ground floor restrictions were based on a 1974 study that found that while the upper floors were rapidly shedding their industrial tenants, the ground floors operated in a way that was similar to one-story buildings in less urban locations, and hence the ground floor restriction. And good faith marketing was intended as a way of comparing the rents that were being asked to the rents for spaces that were already here. And I would just say that in this particular building, the last conforming use on Broadway in Soho has been the International Culinary Institute, which has been there, I think, for about 35 years, and was actually the subject of considerable debate when it located as to whether it was a restaurant or a trade school, to make sure that they weren't just cheating. They were a trade school. They stayed there for 35 years, and the trade school remains there, so in the building. But the business model has changed. So 42 years after that, 43 years after that 1974 study, Soho is a very, very different place. It is a nationally and internationally recognized retail location. As I said before, every storefront, every frontage on Broadway is in retail use, which is a bit odd because, of course, that was its original use when these buildings were built. If you look at the Landmarks Commission report for this building, it was built as a store. It is a naturally occurring, transit-oriented retail location. Transit usage is about 40 or 50% higher on weekends or on shopping days than on weekdays, and is, of course, high on all those occasions. It is accessible by numerous subway lines, and is particularly not accessed by local, by vehicles, but customers come by mostly, overwhelmingly by subway. I would just say nothing else.
Beautifully done, and I will admit that you have me beat by 5 years. My connection to the neighborhood only goes to 73. Questions from the commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Delos.
I was actually hoping he could finish his statement of what he was about to share.
I was just going to respond to something that one of the commissioners asked about restaurants. And I think, successful retail locations are a mix of restaurants and retail, particularly destination locations such as this. There's a story in today's Times about Macy's looking at adding restaurants to its roof. You go to the meatpacking district, it's a mixture of retail and restaurants. Go to Fifth Avenue in Soho, in Park Slope, where I live. The retail streets are mixes of restaurants and other kinds of retail stores. That's what makes a great retail shopping street. And of course, as Richard pointed out, it's the use that has been there for 35 years. So.
Other questions? Commissioner Levin.
Well, Sandy, I can't resist the opportunity of having you here to ask about this whole 74-781 good faith marketing effort. As you certainly while you were here, we saw a stretch of those applications, and we've only gotten more recently, where honestly, that effort that an applicant goes through is probably, often we get testimony, as Mr. Lobel gave us today, that the marketing effort was created and implemented in consultation with city planning. In other words, they're doing an advertising campaign that city planning has told them to do, but we're coming to understand that it's kind of a sham, that nobody is able to turn up a conforming use in this location, and that the prices that are being offered for manufacturing space are prices that no manufacturer will ever use. So I think a number of us have increasing concerns that this whole feature of the zoning resolution is broken and needs reform. I think you see this reflected in the community board's recommendation and a recognition that, or an acknowledgement that the Department of City Planning isn't going to move on this anytime soon. It is a thorny and difficult problem to solve, but one I think we have to solve because the requirements of the zoning resolution are now out of sync with land use patterns in the neighborhood. What should we be doing about 74-781?
We should ditch it. Is the short answer. As I started, it was just, if you stay in the field long enough, you come to regret that solutions to a problem at a particular point in time are not necessarily solutions to the problems a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades later. And that's really the problem. In 1975, when this was adopted, there were, not particularly on Broadway, by the way, Broadway was heavily retailed even then. There were some wholesalers on the street, much more so south of Canal Street. But I would say the dominant use was retail's catering to the factory workers in 1975. But you could do it. You could look at it and you could make those decisions. You can't make them today because it's not just that you can't, no one is going to pay the rents that $400 or $500 or $600 a square foot or whatever they are for retail use on Broadway. The rent that was advertised here was less than the imputed rent. It's a little complicated because they had upper floor space and lower floor space. It was less than the last conforming use was paying. So really, they're the only people who's ever had a standard to measure against, and they've measured against it, and they met that standard. They were not high by that standard. And it was well below the market for what other people were paying. But in the end, it's a provision that's outlived any usefulness, whether you think we were right in 1975 or even stupid then, which one could conclude perhaps we were. It's outlived its usefulness, and for what it's worth, in the 1990s, the department proposed eliminating it. It was tied to a much larger proposal for large retail in the city, and that proposal went down, and it went down with it, although it never engendered any debate whatsoever, the getting rid of the Soho rules at that time. So, but is there any, ask yourself the question, is there any planning commission in any city who would take a major retail street and say, at this point, that space has to be manufacturing or manufacturing type uses? And I think the answer to that is no. It's not an anti-manufacturing statement. You know, I think the best thing that the agency has done is the special permit that was approved in, I guess, Williamsburg or Greenpoint by the Bristol Inlet, that gives people an incentive to create new modern space and uses the same kind of cross-subsidy mechanisms that inclusionary housing does to create new space in places where that kind of space makes sense. The city should compete for all its jobs, and even though the industrial sector is a fraction of what it once was, it doesn't mean we shouldn't compete with it. But there should be some common sense about where that is, and it's not Broadway and Soho.
As attractive as it might sound to say, wow, we could amend the zoning code by saying ditch it, that does go against our community involvement principles. Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. This is much less philosophical, and perhaps you are not the right person to answer it, but I'll put it out there. Maybe the owner is the right person to answer it. Has the thought of smaller retail been contemplated on this site?
Well, I'm not the person to comment. I think the answer you're going to hear is they don't know what their retail is going to be. Right? And they're not advertising. They've been asked not to advertise. They don't advertise. They don't know where the market is.
That's a fine answer, though I would imagine market studies are available and there's a wherewithal understanding of what's going on in retail in the surrounding neighborhood. So I would hope that I could address that question later on to the owner and have a more fulsome answer. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
And that brings up an issue. Does that then mean that there's a possibility this could be subdivided into smaller spaces should the market, and then that could be subsequent speaker can answer that. Even though we have the ability to go over 10,000, that should the market want other things, that it could be result in smaller spaces and subdivision.
Well, once again, I'll let the owner answer that better, but I would just say, going back to the earlier question about these whole regulations, the future is a long time. And market conditions are likely to change many times during that future. And the arrangement of space and uses are likely to change over that time.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Hornick. Our next speaker will be Steve Maringo.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I am the owner. I was thinking of wearing a sweatshirt with a target on it, but I decided to wear a suit instead. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to present to you. Just a little history. We acquired the building in 1981. I've been a real long-term owner, so I'm long in the tooth about this location as well. We put the French Culinary Institute in many years ago. They became the International Culinary Center. I became a good friend of Dorothy Cann Hamilton. I mourn her loss tremendously. She was killed tragically in a car accident last year. My son-in-law graduated from the International Culinary Center and did so at the same time as they were changing their model from having a kitchen downstairs where you could actually just go right downstairs and learn to be a maitre d', a chef, a sous chef, a pastry chef, and practice in place. Dorothy wanted to expand nationally and was, for lots of reasons, and had a location in Los Angeles, and she said it makes more sense to do an externship program. And she had tremendous relationships with people in the restaurant business. So they now place students out in the community in restaurants where they can get direct hands-on experience. It's much more effective, leads much more likely to employment, and hired a broker. Dorothy hired a broker to come to me and said, if we give up the ground floor and second floor, what can we do to extend our lease? And I said, I'm dying to have you stay. So we made a longer-term lease for them upstairs and got back the ground and second floors. I contacted a zoning use attorney, and we afforded ourselves this process. In retrospect, it doesn't matter what I might have done differently, truthfully. This process seemed to be the right direction to go. We have complied with the application for a special permit for the ground floor and second floor, ground floor and basement, excuse me, and have met the findings in accordance with what was afforded to us as the only process to let us put retail in a street that, to me, looks like it deserves a store or more than one store. So that is the history of this site. I find myself here today ready to answer any and all of your questions to the best of my ability, and I'm happy to do so. The chairman has just taken a break. I'll be happy to wait till she returns.
No, we can carry on.
Carry on.
Questions for Mr. Maringoff?
And I apologize, I'm slightly hard of hearing, so I may ask you to repeat. Go ahead.
Questions. We're going to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
I think you've heard my questions already.
But I'd like
I'm
to hear
happy
you
to
repeat it.
them. One, obviously, anyone who walks around New York City recognizes the name Maringoff as a retail
Thank you.
operator. Do you have similar properties in the neighborhood or in other dense retail communities?
Our closest property is 411 Lafayette Street, which, by the way, also is a historic landmark and a cast iron facade building. It's right down from the Public Theater and across from Indochine and the Blue Man Group. We're very proud of that, as we are of 462 Broadway. We maintain these somewhat difficult to maintain cast iron facades, which, by the way, you used to be able to buy from Sears and Roebuck, if you remember that store. You'd be able to buy them in mail order, and they'd come in and they'd put them up. They don't last well and have to be maintained constantly and regularly, and we try to do so. But in answer to what I think you said before, we have 16 buildings. Every one of them has at least one retail store. Restaurants, retail, dry good retailers. We are familiar with the type of issues that retailers have in a mixed-use community. We are sensitive to them, and we do our best to address them. I don't know, truthfully, of any complaints we've had in regards to the International Culinary Center's operation of that restaurant for so long.
And my other question is just one about our obligation to come up with whether it's, or make a determination about its appropriateness in the neighborhood.
Make sure what?
Make sure it's appropriate in the neighborhood, and
Thank you.
question about whether or not there's been any thought to smaller stores rather than one large store.
Sure. Market studies notwithstanding, the best market study you can do is to make a space available and then bring in as many brokers as you can, show them the space, and bring in as many tenants who at that moment are looking for space. We have developed more than one scenario for the leasing of this retail space that includes 1, 2, 3, and more tenants, looked at the issues of loading and unloading and other issues that would be brought up by those scenarios, and are looking forward to getting to the market so that we can do right by the building and by the community. And we do mean both of those.
And just to follow up, does this space lend itself, given the loading and unloading and other aspects, to smaller spaces? And then if you wouldn't mind telling us for your other properties, is it higher rent for a larger space in a neighborhood like Soho or NoHo, or for smaller spaces?
There are a number, let me answer the second one first. So it depends. Larger space generally affords us lower rent per square foot. Having said that, depending on how you have to deal with the very issues we talked about, loading, unloading, and so on, you may lose square footage for a smaller tenant. So the aggregate dollars of rent may end up being the same or slightly less. But you do get generally less rent per square foot from a larger tenant. It's almost like a shopping center model and an anchor tenant type of a thing. Remind me of the first part of it.
Whether the space lends itself to smaller spaces with...
In a way, yes, and in a way, no. We have 200 feet of frontage on Grand Street. So a lot of frontage. They're cast iron frontage, and so we're limited to some degree on the storefronts, but the commission's willing to work with us because they want to see a good use of this retail facade. However, where do you unload and load depends a lot on what type of configuration the store has. If there's no affordability to, say, the Crosby Street side for loading and unloading, and they have to unload and load right on Grand Street, then that's different. And we need curb cuts, and we need the ability to do that. Truthfully, a single retail tenant for the ground floor would give us an easier, but not necessarily the best solution. We are truly mindful. I mean, going through this process, I was at every community board hearing and listened very closely to what the community wants. We're sensitive to it. We want to do what is right for everyone.
And may I just say finally, I'm sure I'm not alone on this commission in thanking you for coming personally and being here, and even more so if you attended all of the community board meetings. Very often we just hear from land use representatives, and it's nice to actually hear from a developer, because one of the things we do is assess other projects, and it's helpful to have the expertise that you bring.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Commissioner Levin.
Mr.
Sounded like an
Mr. Marinov, you meant, actually, I have two questions, but I'll take
Sure.
them in two pieces. You, having sat through the community board meetings, you have certainly heard what their sort of quality of life concerns are associated with that would be associated with a large retail establishment, and you indicated in your previous sentence that you would be sensitive to them.
Right.
Could you tell us a little, supposing this this large-scale permit is approved, and you do find a large tenant, single tenant for the space, how will you address the concerns of trash, lighting, congestion, the headaches of loading, unloading? They're listed in the community board's responses, but for, what will you be doing to be sure that you're the good tenant and not the bad example that your land use council referred to?
Sure. I don't know what tenant we would get, so it would be hard to say whether they'd be a wet use or a dry use. I know that the community board said, quite surprisingly, no to food and beverage. I was quite surprised about that. We would want to make sure, for our purposes, we have office tenants in the rest of our building, and the Culinary Institute themselves. We're not interested in having a disruption from one single tenant if they were a retailer. So we would make sure that there were whatever restrictions we felt appropriate to any and all the things that are just discussed, whether it be loading and unloading, trash collection, lights that are on as if they're an advertisement when in fact they're not. These are sensitive issues to the community. People live there, they live across the street. We need to all live together, and we would try to make sure that we took those into account in whatever lease we wrote.
And then if I might ask my second question, the space that's the subject of these applications is in fact just half the ground floor
That's
space,
correct.
right? And my understanding is that the northern portion, the northern half of the building is subject to another lease. What's the plan there? I know it has signs in the window being advertised for retail use, which is not conforming. How is that happening? And what is your long-term plan for that space? Should we anticipate a similar application for that space one of these days?
Thank you. That space is leased for another 6 years. Daffy's had that space and leased it from us many, many years ago when non-conforming seemed to be what everybody was doing. They then went bankrupt, and I attempted aggressively to use the clause in our lease that said you can't continue on if you're bankrupt, and the bankruptcy court saw differently and allowed them to assign that lease and sell it. It was occupied by Joe Fresh, a similar type of dry good clothing store. They went empty and are attempting to sublease that space. We have no ability to gain control of it, and therefore could not include it in our hardship application because we couldn't advertise it as vacant and available for lease. So it sits sublet to Loblaw, who's Joe Fresh's parent, and we wait. They are unresponsive to any discussion because they want to try to sublet it for whatever reasons they do. As far as I'm concerned, you would not see another application for a hardship on that space for at least 6 years.
Does your lease with them prevent illegal uses?
Illegal uses, not that I know of.
Non-conforming uses? I mean, so you just lease the space and they can do what they want in there, even if it doesn't?
I think the lease specifies that they can run a store. And that is,
okay.
and that is non-conforming
Even
to
that,
zoning.
even though that's a non-conforming use?
That's correct. I believe that's what it says. And as I said, 25 or 30 years ago, that is what we did, and we were told, and we weren't told, that's what everybody did. I apologize for that in advance.
Again, thank you for being here.
Sure.
You mentioned that you've looked at a number of possible scenarios for what the future could hold based on the application that you have. I'm just wondering to what extent those scenarios were shared with the community board and discussed openly.
I think pretty much all of them. If we had, did you bring any of the? we showed them different scenarios. At the time we applied initially, we were ready to go up to, or talking about going up to the 3rd floor and creating an overall, a retail store of 45,000 square feet. I think that's clearly way beyond the pale at the moment, to be perfectly frank about it. I don't think the market would be responsive to that also. You know, I had eyes to see what it would be if we had another Bloomingdale's, a Nordstrom's rack or whatever. I don't think those tenants want to be there. And I don't think the community feels that that much retail would be consistent with the quality of life of the community. So we're listening very carefully to everything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
And our next speaker is Jeff Smithline.
Hi, my name is Jeff Smithline. I'm with Sam Schwartz Engineering. I am the traffic engineer on this project. And much of what I was going to speak to has already been discussed, but I'll just reiterate a couple things. You know, one, just where the site is situated, that it would minimize the amount of vehicular trips that are coming to the site. Just Sandy spoke to the transit access in the area, and that just by the very nature of Soho, that, you know, there aren't a lot of car trips associated with the shopping activity. And I also wanted to speak to the loading, just to expand a little bit on what Steve said, which is that where this site is situated, again, being on a corner and having a long frontage along Broadway and along Grand, and on the near curbs, you know, essentially the east side of Broadway and the north side of Grand Street, there is 3-hour commercial parking allowed Monday through Saturday. The bike lane on Grand Street is on the other side of the street. So again, it's very receptive to loading. Loading is a challenge in Soho, but, you know, you would expect a truck to come down Broadway. It has an opportunity to stop curbside on Broadway. If there's no spaces there, it can actually make a left turn on Grand, since Grand is going eastbound. So it can again try to find curbside loading there, you know, whereas sometimes we find with these smaller shops, especially ones that are located mid-block, if there isn't a space available, even if there's a space further down the street, that they may just stop and you know, they double park and then they start to block traffic. So, you know, the site is very conducive to the loading activity that would occur.
Questions? Thank you. We have a number of speakers in opposition, and as with the applicant team, speakers should limit their remarks to 3 minutes, and we'll start with Eric Mayo.
Hello, my name is Eric Mayo. I'm the Director of Operations for State Senator Daniel Squadron, and I'm delivering this testimony on his behalf. First, I want to thank the Chair and the Commissioners for the opportunity to provide testimony today on this application. On April 21st, Community Board 2 passed a unanimous resolution opposing these 2 special permits. When a community board speaks with a unanimous voice against an application, we believe that the city agency must seriously consider that resolution. According to Community Board 2, currently, only one special permit to operate retail in excess of 10,000 feet exists along the Broadway corridor, as was previously discussed, 550 to 556 Broadway, which was approved in 2009. However, according to Community Board 2, 7 other retail establishments along Broadway are operating without the required special permit. Retail zoning protections exist for a reason. As important, they be enforced before granting new exemptions. This community has continuously fought to protect and preserve Soho's unique character. In July 2015, our office was proud to join with Community Board 2 and the Soho Alliance for the formation of the Soho Design District, which is a group of longtime Soho businesses looking to stay in the community that they created. In addition, along with Councilmember Chin, Borough President Brewer, and Assemblymember Deborah Glick, we stood with the Broadway Residents Association and Community Board 2 to rally for better enforcement of existing zoning in Soho last December. Soho has a unique history as a historic district that doubles as a global center for creativity. Small, locally owned businesses have thrived here because the zoning code limits big box retail and other commercial uses. This zoning code continues to have wide support in the community and should be preserved and enforced. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony today.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Mayo? Yes, Commissioner Arpan.
Do you have an issue with retail being there or just the size of the retail?
So we have an issue, I would say, with we want whatever happens there to exist within the zoning code. I think, as has been discussed, and I think will be discussed by speakers after me, big box retail is a huge issue in Soho. There's been, as I said, there were, I believe, 7 current stores in that corridor that are not conforming to the correct use, and I think it's important that whatever happens conforms to the current zoning.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Erica Baptiste.
Good afternoon. I'm Erica Baptiste, urban planner from the Manhattan Borough President's Office, here to express our concerns with the special permits for 462 Broadway. As you all know, we have substantial concerns about the special permits in the Soho area. With this, we have concerns about the materials submitted by the applicant to demonstrate its good faith effort to rent the space for manufacturing use. The original asking rents fell right below the asking rents for ground floor retail space in Soho on Broadway between Houston Street and Broome Street, captured in Revenue's fall 2014 report. But after a meeting with DCP, they reduced the rents, which reflected more of the recent listings for manufacturing space for applicants pursuant to the special permit in the area. But unlike many of these types of applications we've reviewed over the past couple of years, this applicant sought 2 different rent prices for the ground and cellar spaces, whereas other applicants have included the cellar space in the price for the ground floor space. Although the applicant argues that the asking price is a discount, it's in line with the rent that the International Culinary Center pays. Our office has engaged with creators and designers in the Garment Center and beyond in Manhattan, and we have come to learn that the asking price in Soho is at least 2 to 3 times what would be reasonably expected to be paid elsewhere in the city. If we're going to continue to review 74781 special permit applications in the absence of a study, we must insist that the Department of City Planning set an appropriate manufacturing price per square foot or provide applicants with an appropriate range based upon what manufacturers might pay for a space in Lower Manhattan, and not some type of formula based upon the commercial, retail, or residential value of the space. 2 other factors raise questions about the adequacy of good faith of the marketing effort. The first was raised here when the application was first presented for certification, when the applicant, after the required 1-year marketing period, but prior to certification, the applicant began marketing the premises for lease as a retail establishment for a large flagship or boutique. While counsel at DCP opined that such marketing does not violate the legal requirements, it is not clear to us that it comports with the spirit of the law. The second special permit is for a large retail establishment. The applicant packet states that Soho is already a retail destination and that granting of the special permit will not impair the character of the surrounding area and will not interfere with uses in the area. The representatives have argued that existing oversized retail along Broadway, which have been cited with violations for illegal conversion from manufacturing space by the Department of Buildings, make this proposal within the character of the neighborhood. Illegal uses and establishments as rationale for land use decision is illogical. JLWQA units are part of the character, and there is a track record of the adverse effects these large retail uses have. Furthermore, we question the long-term viability given the anticipated rents and retail trends. There have been a number of articles written in the New York Times and USA Today lately stating that the decline of retail along major shopping corridors of the city. Stores are closing, including flagship stores. Retail employees are losing jobs, and storefronts are remaining vacant as more retail businesses move to e-commerce. There's a legitimate concern that this 45,000 square foot space could remain vacant if the special permit is granted.
Thank you, Ms. Baptiste. Questions? Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. What do you or the borough president think is the ideal use if we could do away with the zoning issues as they currently are configured for the ground floor?
Well, I don't think the borough president was opposed to the original use with the restaurant in that space, but if we weren't looking at zoning, or I guess I can't really answer that part, but if the applicant had proposed smaller retail spaces, as was presented at the community board, but even smaller, I think the borough president would have been more on board with this application.
That's really what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Good.
Commissioner Ortiz.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm curious, what are the practical implications of the DOB violations at this point? Do those spaces continue to operate and the owner simply pays a fine, or what?
Well, I know that there have been some hearings, or there was a hearing with DOB. I think one of the community board members can speak to that. I'm not sure if the chair is here, but they have to provide proof that they can actually operate there. It looks like they're not closing, they're being cited, and
So they will
to
remain
fix
in
it.
operation. We're going to have,
that's what it seems.
regardless of the violations, they will
Yeah.
remain in operation.
That's what it appears.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Baptiste.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Charles Anderson.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Charles Anderson. I work in Assembly Member Deborah Glick's office. I am the office liaison to boards 2 and 3. The Assembly members in Albany today on state business related to the legislative session, and I'll be delivering testimony on her behalf. Thank you for the opportunity to testify regarding the special use permit application for 462 Broadway in the Soho neighborhood. While the Soho portion of Broadway is informally known as a shopping destination, many residents still live in the area and are forced to contend daily with the quality of life issues and other problems exacerbated by what the applicant is seeking. Nonetheless, M15A and B districts permit specific retail uses that the applicant, who has owned the building for many decades, should be required to follow existing law in regards to retail uses rather than applying for this special change in zoning. For this and other important reasons, the Assembly urges the City Planning Commission to deny the application. In regards to special use permits and land use needs, a special use permit that follows the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, or ULURP, is the formal, legal, and public process for allowing oversized retail uses. As Community Board 2 initially heard this proposal for a special use permit at 462 Broadway, there are likely to be more special use permits in order to legalize non-conforming retail spaces throughout Soho and NoHo. It is then possible that for Community Board 2 and local residents, specifically a wave of special use permits will be heard in order to legalize delinquent retailers that have recently been issued violations, and other developers who will want to make regular use of a special use permit. The long process of a single ULURP is difficult enough for a community board to hear, in addition to their other duties, but the potential 6 special use permit ULURPs that will come before the board imminently has the potential to overburden them if they are not given the proper support here. This onerous process will only increase if the special permit is approved, and community board will be forced to review a number of these applications seeking the same result. Instead, retailers should be required to adhere to current zoning law, and the city should engage with the community to produce a comprehensive community plan that favors residents, acknowledges these buildings' place in a historic district, and ensures that residents, businesses, and other commercial needs can exist together in a mixed-use community. The creation of a destination shopping attraction in Soho has negatively affected residents before. And additionally, there are 5 violating retail spaces still in the process of making their oversized retail establishments legal, as has been discussed through ECB violations and the DOB. These stores bypass the required public community process that is being followed in this application and has allowed for specific concerns and issues to be aired by residents in the community at large. In regards to quality of life concerns and the required EAS, over 450 residential units were found in buildings that form the immediate surrounding area around 462 Broadway. Only 2 of the addresses that abut the property do not contain residential uses in some way. Frequently, during the community board hearing process, the applicant made repeated arguments that manufacturing uses within M15B districts would be far more offensive to the needs of a residential community than any inconveniences brought on by retail uses. However, it should be understood that Soho is in fact currently a mixed-use community. And regardless of what the dominant industry is, where the retail or industrial uses apply, special attention should be made to how residents and commercial enterprises can exist well together. Can I just say one last thing, is that considering the ECB violations for the 5 other Soho spaces that are comparable to this location with DOB, we'd like this to be delayed until that time that they're figured out. Because of these reasons and the other aforementioned points, we urge the commission to deny this application.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Peter Davies.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Peter Davies, and I speak today in opposition to these applications for 462 Broadway. Many of my neighbors could not attend today, but included with my testimony is a petition signed by over 50 of those neighbors stating opposition. In addition, over 36 of our neighbors have been in opposition have been submitted to city planning. The strong and unified community opposition is in line with the very thorough resolution from CB2 and the equally comprehensive recommendation from Borough President Gail Brewer, both urging denial of these applications. My written testimony goes into greater depth than is allowed under the very limited 3-minute time allotment, so I will begin with an outline of my key points, explaining why this retail plan will bring multiple negative impacts to our mixed-use live-work community in Soho and why these applications should be denied. Broadway in Soho is overrun with non-permitted, illegal, oversized retail operations in violation of zoning. Claims that unlawful situations should be the standard for the allowance of additional oversized retail in our community fails to address the impact of such retail, most of which was installed without important community review. This is outlined in depth in the CB2 resolution of paragraphs 8 through 11. Oversized and high-impact destination retail has brought adverse impacts to our live-work neighborhood, altering the essential character of this mixed-use community. Negative impacts of such retail are outlined in the CB2 resolution, paragraph 16A through D. The applicant should be held to account for long-term allowance of illegal, non-permitted retail within 462 Broadway. That unlawful retail is allowed for self-enrichment of the applicant for the past 2 decades. He notes today that he's apparently still getting rent for the illegal lease. This is noted in the CB2 resolution, paragraph 19. How that can be called a hardship is beyond me. Failure of the applicant to fulfill the requirement for good faith marketing for 462 Broadway, including the current marketing for illegal, non-permitted retail in the building. More details in the CB2 resolution, pages 19 through 20. I offer these photographs of the posters that are now in the window offering retail. If the applicant states that they cannot control what's posted in their windows, how can we believe that they can control any tenant that they put in there, which is the problem that we see all up and down Broadway. We hear from building owners, oh, we can't really control our tenant. Meanwhile, residents are faced with nightly retail deliveries that go on for hours. It's so bad. I live in a building at 548 Broadway where Uniqlo, one of the retailers that has been issued the violation from DOB, they do retail deliveries 6 nights a week, 52 weeks a year. It's so bad that DOT has installed a motion and sound activated camera above the operation to collect data on the noise that it's producing so they can do a study. They've determined, questions please, I've lived here for 37 years and I have a lot of information I could give you.
I suspect there will be a question or two. Yes, Commissioner Ortiz.
2 questions. One with respect to the large spaces.
Yes.
So, we have heard some testimony that smaller spaces result in more loading and unloading, although the Uniqlo example suggests that's not always the case, but that, larger space may have less of certain kinds of impacts.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Well, I
response to
think
that?
in fact, this is the marketing image that 462 put out that Ms. Levin noted in the review session. Oh, sorry. It's big any way you look at it, up or down. But this is 45,000 square feet. That's similar to what Uniqlo has illegally. What we see is they have to have a nighttime crew. So they bring in this massive 50-foot truck that parks downstairs, metal things going over metal interior truck across the sidewalks, right below our windows for hours on end. And they can't do this during the day for a big retail. Smaller retailers do deliveries during the day. Big retail does it at night. And that is one of the huge differences between big and small. We don't have
is it fair to say you're more comfortable with the smaller spaces than the larger spaces?
As CB2 said, something below 10,000 square feet, including the cellar space. That's another situation that's odd with the zoning resolution. When the zoning resolution was written, it seems that cellar space was not selling space, so it wasn't included. Now, especially, I believe Uniqlo might have been the first when it went in 2006 to use cellar space on Broadway as selling space. So that is something that's changed in the last decade. So the inclusion of the cellar space as under 10,000 is much less impact.
Okay, one follow-up. So, and the other is with respect to the eating establishment.
Yes.
You know, there was a previous tenant that had a very similar use.
Yes.
We've asked, and it's been answered, that there's a kitchen and ventilation in that space to accommodate a similar use. What is your response to that, a continuation of a previous use?
Well, the C of O clearly states that that restaurant is only to be allowed as an accessory to a trade school. It's written right on the C of O. The hours are very different than what would be for Tom, Joe, Dick, and Harry who put in a restaurant. What controls would be put on that? My neighbors who live more immediately was surrounded by residents, can speak to the problem of food uses, and which brings in a whole other different delivery, trash, whole other situation. So I agree with CB2, as has been stated throughout the M15 A and B, that eating and drinking establishments are not what this area, which is 80% floor area residential, is needed. If I could also just make one point, the other approved large-scale operations, other than Banana Republic at 550 Broadway, which is only 18,000 square feet, the others are on Houston Street, Lafayette, Houston, and Broadway. Much different area, not residential. It's basically a highway with some new big box stores. So looking at the micro neighborhoods of Soho is really important when you're looking at these various applications.
Other questions for Mr. Davies? Yes, Commissioner Dwight.
So, going back to your concerns, and I certainly hear them, I wouldn't want to have a truck delivery at all hours of night. But assuming that the landlord was successful in renting it out as a manufacturing use, how would that attenuate your concerns over the noise or the traffic or deliveries or whatever else might be going on in the manufacturing side versus the retail side?
It's always something I think that you have to balance, that you have to look at and figure out what's going on. Neighbors who live in proximity to this site will hopefully discuss the situation that they have been experiencing with the current tenant and what type of interaction there has been with the applicant on that. It's a mixed-use evolving neighborhood requires fixes every once in a while. We were promised a study a year or so ago. We were hoping to have that discussion. That's stalled. Meanwhile, how DOB has allowed these illegal retail operations to open, how they were inspected and allowed to open over the last 10 years is a question for another day perhaps, but it's an interesting question that, and it fell right in line with the employment of Chief Manhattan Construction, Donald O'Connor, who was arrested in February 2015 and charged with bribes and fraud for inspections. So who knows what's going on, but there are a lot of questions about how this neighborhood has become what it has now become, in many ways an illegal manner.
Other questions for Mr. Davies? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to some of your neighbors. Actually, no, next is Frederica Siegel from CB2.
hard to follow, Pete. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Frederica Siegel, and I'm the co-chair of CB2's Land Use Committee. Thank you for your familiarity with our resolution denying the special permit for the oversized retail. This applicant came before the committee at our March and April meetings. On both occasions, the applicant team seemed surprised by the turnout for the special permit and by the unanimity and vehemence of the many neighbors who spoke against it. At the March meeting, a suggestion that actually garnered some traction was made that they split the space into 3 less than 10,000 square foot spaces with entrances on Grand Street. The applicant team did not respond to that. After an interim meeting with the land use chairs and another presentation to the land use committee, they again chose not to address our concerns about mega retail. The community board then voted unanimously against approval of this project at its April full board meeting. I don't believe that we are opposed to retail in this space, but we are united in its opposition. CB2 is united in its opposition to special permits for any more oversized retail in Soho. We are committed to working vigilantly to protect the delicate balance between residential quality of life and retail in Soho, and oversized retail severely damages this balance. We recognize that the applicants are good actors and we want them to succeed. But we need to remember that the special permit attaches to the property, and responsible as Mr. Marengoff is, he is unlikely to be the last owner of the property. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Siegel? Commissioner Dwyer?
Yeah, I want to go back to my prior question, my previous question. So, in your opinion, you'd rather see multiple smaller retailers than one 45,000 square foot of manufacturing in the
Yes, and we also, the idea that was floated had the entrances on Grand Street. That's more complicated for the owner, but it does move some of the traffic.
And in the general Soho district, not just in, my question would not just apply to that 462 Broadway, but in general, you'd rather see, you wouldn't prefer manufacturing over retail?
Well, I'm a single individual.
Okay.
I believe that the way Pete describes it, the retail is a 24-hour-a-day operation, and I don't think the manufacturing would be.
A large retail would be 24 hours, or a...
Large retail, yes.
A large retail.
Yes. But, well, let's leave it
It's a
at that.
philosophical question that I think we're
Yes.
trying to grapple with over here, because we have a lot of the special permit applications, and the flip side of a special permit application would be a manufacturing use, and I don't know what the community or the residents would prefer. And that's-
Yes, well, it's been discussed today that the good faith marketing program is a sham. People follow it. If you actually do every step, the list of names that they suggest that you send to is grossly outdated, and the type of ad is usually insufficient. I applaud Mr. Marengoff and his team for having, I saw the ads, because we did have, CB2 had an application for properties on Canal Street a few years ago, and the ads were the size of a postage stamp, and they were sent to addresses where there was no recipient. So we flagged that, and I believe that was part of what might have prompted subsequent good faith marketing attempts to improve a little bit. But you don't really have to do a very good job to meet the requirements.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Siegel.
Thank you.
Our next speaker in opposition is Ronnie Wolf.
Dear Chairman Largo, my name's Ronnie Wolf. I've lived in Soho for 40 years and across the street from 462 Broadway for 28. I live and own a commercial space, and I represent the concerns of several residential buildings along Grand Street. On behalf of my neighbors, I'd like to thank CB2 Land Use Committee and Gail Brewer for taking the time to understand the present picture of Soho's mixed-use neighborhood. When commercial owners started leasing spaces to retailers which were over 10,000 square feet, the quality of lives of those residents living along Broadway, as well as those on the sidewalks, became unraveled. It should be noted that Community Board 3 is presently exploring
how to protect the retail diversity of the East Village as large chains are moving into the neighborhood, and before, as what has been happening in Soho, its unique mom-and-pop stores are being pushed out. 6 large commercial owners and developers recently received DOB violations for ignoring Soho zoning laws. One must assume they all want zoning in Soho changed, destroying the essential character and property values of its residents. Yes, there's a large amount of commercial spaces, including oversized, that are vacant along Broadway, but Broadway is not dying. It's in flux, making a correction. Owners who over-leverage themselves cannot expect to receive the outrageous rents of previous years. Owners need to lower their rents, give concessions to attract new tenants, and make airtight assurances to the residents of this thriving residential area that they won't tolerate tenants disrupting our quality of life with mandatory language inserted within their leases to abide by. In 2013, the Lobel Land Use and Zoning newsletter article, Rezoning in New York City, offered a how-to guide to rezone the M1 zoning district such as ours, but did not address the negative impact on those residing in such districts. Lobel claims that rezoning like this can be considered a win-win-win. It's a plus for the city as it fixes the zoning map to better reflect actual land use, and it's a win for the neighboring property owners who will now be able to make alterations and even enlarge their properties. Marengoff hired Lobel to assist them with their special permit process. If Marengoff's special permits are granted, they will inevitably help pave the way for the illegally leased spaces in Soho to become legal, and perhaps lead to the incomprehensible change in Soho's zoning. With residential units circling the entire building, the outcome of your decision will be the tipping point. I urge the commissioners to deny this application. Respectfully, Ronnie Wolf. And I'd like to address Mr. Marengoff's testimony that he was unaware of any complaints against the building or the French Culinary Institute. Well, I can speak for numerous violations that were made by the sanitation department for their disposal of food substances down storm drains.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any questions? Yes, thank you. Commissioner Levin.
Ms. Wolf, are you opposed to any retail use at this location or just the large scale?
Large scale.
Just the large scale.
And I'd like to also address that I've lived across the street when I was able to watch manufacturing being done by beautiful dress designers and things, so it can be done.
Good. And how long ago did those uses depart?
6 years ago, 4 years ago,
Okay, roughly, thank you.
Yeah, maybe 3 years ago.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Wolf.
Yeah.
Our next speaker in opposition is Kim Lipman.
Hi. My name is Kim Lipman. I am a residential building owner in the building immediately next door to this property. This is and I represent all of the owners in my building. This is a very residential street and neighborhood, including in my building, ground floor residential immediately next door to this building. I apologize, I had written testimony, but I had the impression that this was a little bit later. I ran here for my daughter's graduation ceremony today. This is now the 4th meeting that I've been to, community meeting that I've been to regarding this property and this application. I will say that as a residential owner, it's sort of a hardship having to come to all of these different meetings in order to have the existing rules of the neighborhood enforced. And I would like to just point out how disappointing it would be in many regards for this application, which is so clearly opposed by the neighborhood and by the community board, by numerous representatives of the community. It would be disturbing for the determination of those entities to be ignored and to have this I mean, just, there is such unanimous opposition to it. And so I think that that would send a message to every other business owner along Broadway that they should also come here and we should go through this same process. This would be many more community board meetings and special permit meetings for everyone, again, for uses which are not predicted by people who purchased homes in this neighborhood. City planning made a commitment, a further commitment to the residential character of this neighborhood, I believe in around 2000, in the early 2000s, when a decision was made to allow the parking lots in Soho to become residential, developed for residential uses. So it has become an increasingly residential neighborhood over time because of the decisions made by city planning. And so, you know, as an owner, I'm looking for the predictability that I thought was assured by the existing zoning rules. I also want to speak to being in the building next door. The owner of this space has said that he's been very sensitive to the concerns of the community. I wanted to mention that at the last couple of meetings of the community, I mentioned that I had problems with the noise from the ventilation systems on their roof. I actually showed him pictures of the rooftop ventilation equipment at the top of his building. He didn't, in fact, recognize that that was the rooftop of his building initially, but he took pictures with his phone of those pictures and said, oh, yes, you know, we'll be in touch and I will do something about this, and nothing has been done about that. There is loose metal debris on top of some, from years ago, there were noise problems, and so they had received violations from the DEP in connection with those mechanical systems. And so in order to cure those violations, they had to put some soundproofing in place, which was a very hideous chain link fence supporting some sound material. Can I finish my sentence? Some sound material. It was certainly not a great solution, but that material is loose and unsecured, and there's metal debris just kind of sitting on top of it.
If you
And
could wrap up,
this
Ms.
was
Lipman.
brought up many times. So I would hardly say that he's sensitive to the community. So
I very much want to thank you, Ms. Lipman, for the investment of the time. We certainly, as a commission, benefit from hearing from residents, and so appreciate the sacrifice, particularly on a day when you're celebrating your daughter.
Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Lipman? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I'm curious, there's a map right at your right elbow there. Could you point to your building on that? The building we're talking about is outlined in red.
yeah, so that's this building here. So I'm right here.
Okay, so you're on Crosby Street.
1179, yes.
Okay.
So, and there's a residential unit right here, a residential unit right here. This is the lobby for this residential building, and this is another residential unit,
Okay.
ground floor, and the rest of the building is residential.
Okay, and just going north up the block while you're
It's
there.
JLWQ.
Are there other residential,
This building, I believe, is residential from the 5th floor up.
Mhm. So typical Soho
This
mixed?
building is the Top Shop building. Oh, yes, this is Top Shop right here. So we're retail to go into this building now. I mean, we have definitely had a lot of trouble from the retail usage on, I mean, basically, so this is a small little sliver here, but Top Shop uses Crosby Street for all of their back end, you know, waste disposal and all of that, despite having just a 25-foot presence on this side and 3 times as much
Right.
on the Broadway
So that
side.
actually gets to my next question. What's the living experience of having Topshop loading on Crosby?
Horrible.
But what steps go, you know,
Horrible.
when
I
does
mean,
it happen
it's-
and what are
it's
they
a-
doing?
What I haven't even followed it now. Unfortunately, I thought that my the neighbor who's right next door there, I mean, he suffers a lot from Topshop, but when this meeting was moved by a week, he's not able to be here today. So that's part of his testimony that he'll submit. And so, but the amount of, I mean, we succeeded over the course of many years in tackling some of the garbage-related issues. It's very hard to get attention from a retail tenant when there's zero commitment from the owner to resolving those problems. I mean, once they've leased the space, they're collecting rent, and as a neighbor on the street, you're just battling the leaseholder, or I mean the tenant, and it's horrible. I mean, I don't have any better way to describe it. It's just like a daily battle. Fortunately, we have there's a doorman and a super in this building, and so we've tried to put some of that on them. They do a tremendous amount of, I mean, they clean the whole street sidewalk, really. And so it's just picking up after, some lack of maintenance by other owners,
Right.
commercial owners.
Thank you.
Hi, I also want to thank you. Being an engaged citizen can be a challenge
Trying.
sometimes, but we had heard earlier from the consultant to the applicant, Sandy Hornick, who has a long history with the department and gave us some insight into the street, and that even then, 20, 30 years ago, there was a significant retail presence on this street. And that, at the time, it was serving some of the laborers and employees for many of the manufacturing spaces, and there's active manufacturing on the street. I imagine it would be a challenging place to live then as well. I'm curious, sort of, when you moved to this location, there was an eating establishment there. I understand it was associated with the trade school, and perhaps the hours were different. We had a very busy street, Soho, Broadway, that had a lot of retail uses. As a commission, we deal with the streets that are evolving all the time, and it seems to me that there was opposition, not across the board to retail use here, but perhaps to the larger use, and not necessarily the smaller uses. Where do you fall on that? Because we are dealing with a shopping street ultimately.
Right. So where do I fall on that? I feel that there's quite a lot of retail in Soho already. In some ways, I mean, it's the fact that there is so much vacant retail along Broadway has been almost a breath of fresh air in the last couple of years, or sorry, it's not been a couple of years. It's been maybe, would you say, a year since that has been? 2 years? And because it's relieved a little bit of the back-end nightmare on my street that has developed over the last 10 years. I've lived on Crosby Street now for 10 years, so I can't speak to what it was like before then. I understand that this building, before it was converted 17 years ago, the building that I live in was a box cutting factory. I've heard from people that it was loud, but it was not, it was not, I don't know, that was how things were. But it was not the same amount of trash, pedestrians leaving trash on the streets, overflowing garbage cans, retail deliveries throughout the night. I mean, that's really, when everyone's doing that, like if everyone, I mean, the trouble here is, I mean, this is a commons dilemma, really. I mean, can everyone do the same thing? Is Broadway meant to be a huge mall? I'm not really sure. It's not my place to dictate what the whole neighborhood should be. I mean, certainly I'm a concerned citizen, but if everything is the same, I mean, I understand everyone wants this use because it's perceived as the highest rent-producing usage for them and their desire for commercial business owners, and their desire is to achieve as high a rent as they can. But I don't know that that's, again, I think that these, not again, but I think that someone needs to account for whether the owner of the space will use this privilege of having a special permit responsibly, and there have to be consequences. It can't just be an approval and say, okay, well, now there's a special permit for retail there, and it's the Wild West. I mean, anyone can do what they want, because we're just going to have more of the same.
I probably should be noted for the public record that there is a business improvement district along Soho that was established for the precise reason of maintaining the street and addressing a lot of the sanitation issues that you've raised some concerns about, and that the board of that organization includes both residents and property owners. And so that in itself is a mechanism to address some of the broader concerns that you raised.
Right. And what maybe you should also note is that many of these buildings along Broadway have back ends on Crosby Street, and so it actually doesn't necessarily regulate what happens on Crosby Street, right? And so Broadway can fix its problems by pushing them out to the backside on Crosby Street and Mercer Street. So.
Other questions for Ms. Lippman?
And I think we're a beautiful landmarked street with cobblestones. It's a shame to see it become a back alley as opposed to a classy cobbled landmarked street. So.
Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you listening.
Our next speaker in opposition is Michelle Varian.
Hello, thank you. I'd like to thank the CB2 as well as the Manhattan Borough President's Office for also expressing their opposition and really listening to the community. I'm Michelle Varian. I speak in opposition as well. I live on Broadway in Soho and also own a small business in Soho. I started my design and manufacturing business out of my loft in 1999. After 9/11, I was able to open my own shop, at which I still made many of my home accessories in the back. The first was a tiny shop on Crosby, in fact, just behind 462 Broadway. And while I was there, when Topshop opened, we were very much impacted as a small business, in addition to the residents, because they would have massive trucks that made it impossible to pass on Crosby Street. Crosby Street cannot handle that kind of freight. The size of those trucks are completely inappropriate, and since some of the residential tenants couldn't come, there are 4 residential ground floor residences on that block that have to deal with Topshop's trucks pulling up at all hours. I live on Broadway, almost next door to Bloomingdale's. Their trucks arrive on Crosby, not on Broadway, at any time of the night. After, I don't know what year it was that they eliminated the no honking signs for the city, but those trucks arrive and they blow their horn until someone comes outside to take care of the shipping. And they do that at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., whenever they arrive. And that horn is like a freighter horn. It's one of those crazy horns. And they don't keep them from doing it, and it happens regularly. Going back to the fact that I own a small business, I was able to start with a small shop on Crosby Street. I moved to a gradually larger shop, in addition to selling the home goods that I produced, which now has grown to product that I manufacture locally, from lighting, textiles, furniture, and wallpaper. In addition to those things which I design and manufacture, I've now grown to a much larger space 1 block away, where I carry the goods of over 100 additional product designers, primarily based here in New York, doing their manufacturing in the tri-state area. Those people have begun having to push their manufacturing further and further out of the city. As happens, I'm also from Detroit, where they're having a resurgence. The number of people moving, the number of creatives leaving New York City and going to cities like Detroit that affords them opportunity is going to really impact New York City if we don't watch it. We don't need the design center of the U.S. to move. That would really devastate New York's economy. Right now, my business supports over 100 other designers. They are all looking for manufacturing spaces. However, they cannot afford $90 a square foot. I myself, when I was looking for a new location, attempted to call some of the spaces on Lower Broadway, recognizing that they had been manufacturing spaces and thinking that even though they were on Broadway, they might be affordable. They were not.
Thank you for bringing the small business owner perspective. Questions for Ms. Varian? Commissioner Deleuze.
Ms. Varian, thanks for being here. What would be a manufacturing rent in the area that would work for you and the other designers that you work with?
Well, it was discovered that in Midtown, it's about $25 to $35 a square foot. More than that is absolutely not sustainable for a manufacturing business. However, that used to work, and that is what created a very sustainable, viable community of diversity, and it was dynamic. It was self-sustaining. You know, people who lived in the neighborhood shopped in the neighborhood. I was able to get goods from the neighborhood shops. I could have things manufactured by a neighbor. It was very dynamic, and it was a wonderful experience. It still exists a little bit today, and it would be wonderful to preserve what is left. And the manufacturing, by the way, they close by 6 p.m. In fact, they often close by 4 p.m. You can hear a pin drop in manufacturing neighborhoods by 6:30 p.m.
Other questions? Commissioner Efron.
Since we have you as a local manufacturer and a retailer with designers and manufacturers, do any of your 100 producers work out of the garment center, and do you have a strong point of view on that as a manufacturing center?
Well, sadly, I had sewers who worked in the garment center. One of the manufacturing studios that I worked with used to have 30 seamstresses. Because they could not continue to pay the rent, they kept making their spaces smaller. They had fewer seamstresses. They can no longer take more work. So I can no longer give them what I need done. They can't do it. It's turned into like a downward spiral of no support. So now I actually have women who I hire and sew in-house for me.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Varian.
Come to Brooklyn.
Our next speaker in opposition is John Powell.
Yeah, I'm John Powell. I'm a member of the residential co-op at 458 Broadway, directly across Grand from the building. I don't really have much to add to what's been said before. I'm very concerned about the impact of large-scale retail. It is not an anti-retail stance. It's large-scale retail. You ask questions about, does it really matter? The small deliveries to smaller stores are executed quicker with smaller vehicles. It really is a very different thing. As this woman said, this going to large-scale retail is, in fact, kind of changing Crosby and Mercer into back alleys for Broadway. And that's sad because lived in Soho for 5 years, been coming up here for 20-some years. And the beauty of Mercer and Crosby and those streets is at risk, and the character of the neighborhood is going to change negatively because of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks. Our next speaker in opposition is Terry Coote.
Good afternoon, Chair Lago and Commissioners. I'm Terry Coote. I'm the Chair of Community Board 2 Manhattan. There's several very serious issues with this application that have implications both for 462 Broadway and the larger area of Soho, as others have said. Our board was very concerned about good faith marketing. First, it was marketed as retail, and for the 781. Then it was adding in cellar space with a cost that is not normally put into a manufacturing or conforming use. So either you're saying cellar space is retail and therefore you should pay for it, so that isn't good faith, or you're saying cellar space isn't retail because the conforming uses haven't had it. You can't have it both ways. So we believe that the good faith finding of 781 was not met. There is no land use justification for this. The applicant pointed to existing oversized retail as the character of Soho, but as you've heard, that oversized retail is largely illegal, and the ones that are legal have used some interesting loopholes. Calling an apparel store a sporting goods store is very interesting and creative, but I would say that it's not really the character of the neighborhood. This is a mixed-use neighborhood, and we must respect the residents and the small businesses that drive this, and the manufacturing that remains, and the newer types of manufacturing that are starting to emerge that we haven't even considered yet. So oversized retail serves non-local needs. It crowds the streets and the already challenged sidewalks and doesn't serve anybody but the landlord. Soho deserves its retail to serve its small businesses and its residents. And retail is changing. Even the Dwayne Reeds in the neighborhood are starting to close. So these oversized spaces will soon be oversized blight. So we do a community board to ask you to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
Would you also ask us to deny the permit for retail use?
The
Just
oversized retail, the over 10,000?
No, any retail. There are two pieces to their application.
No, our resolution said if you break it up into 10,000 square feet, including cellar, because now cellar, there was a time when cellar space really was just storage for the manufacturing. That's gone. Cellar space is selling space now. So therefore, we said break it up into smaller units that take smaller deliveries, that have less destination retail uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. Our next speaker in opposition is Laura Tenenbaum.
Who gets written testimony?
If you submit it to
Thank
the
you.
secretary, we'll get copies of it. Thank you.
There's considerably more written there than I can say in 3 minutes. My name is Laura Tenenbaum. I speak today in opposition to the application for 462 Broadway. I've resided within the applicant study area for 44 years, and just as a matter of identification, I was on the community board too, during which time I served as chair of their land use committee for quite a while. I support the positions taken by Borough President Brewer and Community Board 2 and refer you to their excellent submissions. Our community's experience with approximately 19 or so oversized retail stores in Soho, most of them operating without special permits, has proven that Use Group 610A does not function well in our community. Such uses pose a direct threat to the viability of our unique neighborhood, whose character contributes so much to the economic diversity and success of our city. I direct you to my written testimony, which gives more detail, but want to highlight now. First, Soho is not Flushing Commons. That may seem like a non sequitur, but the destination retail truck trip generation rates and temporal distributions in the EAS are based on Flushing Commons FEIS. It paints a poor picture of the reality of the operation of trucks in Soho, such as evening and nighttime deliveries by tractor trailers to Bloomingdale's and Topshop's Crosby Street delivery entrances. Both those stores are operating without special permits. Second, Use Group 17D, Joint Living Work Quarters for Artists, is a light manufacturing use unique to Soho and NoHo. It's negatively impacted by large retail and is not accurately reflected in the EAS, including Table 5. For example, I live in an all-artists building. You must have certification by the Department of Cultural Affairs to reside in one of our units. It is listed as a multifamily elevator building. Its use is not accurately shown, and because I held a lot of hearings on conversions while I was on the board, I know that a lot of the places within that are joint living work quarters for artists, and they're not shown to be so. Use Group 9, a conforming use, is more than a trade school. It is a viable choice that was not explored, and I want you to point to 200 Lafayette Street, which is just on the edge of the study area, where Perch is located, which is Use Group 9, and it just opened last year. M15, the truth of the matter is that M15B zoning was not intended to support large retail establishments. Nevertheless, there are a considerable number of retail establishments larger than 10,000 square feet within the zoning district, most operating without special permit. The impact of their operations on the district residents and businesses could have and should have been directly studied. It was not. Narrative accounts from opponents unanimously cite the negative impact of large-scale retail on the viability of this unique character of Soho. I have one last paragraph. May I?
If you could condense it
Yes,
to a
It
sentence.
is a condensed, no, yeah, what it basically says is that the last thing we need is a destination store like this. Absent a conforming use, which I support, the next best thing would be offices on the upper floors that would provide customers for a ground floor only use group 6 retail.
Ms. Tenenbaum will gladly read your letter. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could stay, if there may be questions from
Okay.
commissioners.
Any?
Commissioner Ortiz.
I'll ask the same clarifying question. So you are comfortable with ground floor retail use, uncomfortable with the over 10,000 square foot special permit?
Okay, not so comfortable. I think that we should look, as I said, for use group 9. Uses, something like that, that is conforming, if possible. Secondary to that, but I don't think that it's really been proved that a conforming use is not viable here. Contrary to that, a small retail is more like what we do have now and has been happening for a long time, but not in the basement.
And what about your stance on eating establishments?
That was my other hat. I chaired these liquor application committee for years. Tell me about it. I started out when the Padavan law was first passed, so I had to make up things. In fact, I suggested, and it went into the ABC law, that liquor licenses could only be given if the C of O permitted it. That was not originally in the ABC law, and it was in our community, Soho, that we saw this being most abused, and that's why we got it into the law. There's a real problem with eating and drinking establishments in Soho. The buildings, it means late-night noise, and late-night noise doesn't work well in Soho. That's been what we've been saying about the trucks and the deliveries that we get from the large establishments too. Late-night noise, the noise just seems to reflect on the buildings, the big glass windows. It just doesn't work. It doesn't, it's not a happy connection. And so I would be opposed to eating and drinking establishment.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Tenenbaum. That is the last of the speakers who have registered, but I will open it up if there's anyone else in the room who would want to speak. If not, then the hearing is closed. And Madam Secretary, is there any other business before the commission?
No, Chair Lago.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.